All right, hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Jiu-Jitsu and Coffee. Today, we're joined with our special guest, Stephen Ciambrone, to my right, and also Kylani Secor and Brendan Secor. So I wanted to get started. Today I want to kind of go a little bit off script and just get to know our guest. So Stephen, you're a black belt under Master P, as I like to call him.
Master P, yeah. I am.
Yeah. How we were talking earlier, but let's kind of reset.
Sure.
As if we hadn't had that conversation. How long did it take you to get your black belt?
About 9 years. I was about 7.5 years with Luis, and I was with Larry Shealy here in Jacksonville for about 2 years.
Yeah.
Prior to that.
Yeah, I know Larry. I started with Larry as well. He was one of the early. I don't know if you know. He was like the original pioneer. Hopefully I don't offend anyone with that. That's like kind of, I think there was a small group. I think it was him and Lionel Perez and Thomas Strickland and Brett Hicks. But it was a real small group. But Larry was the guy who brought it here. He was the guy. He was flying out to California and getting lessons, and then he would come back here and teach.
Yeah, I know a little bit about, from the pictures on his wall, I knew a little bit about his history, training with Hoist Gracie a little bit. And yeah, I was actually there the day that he got his black belt, because he was a brown belt when I started, and then he got his black belt from a guy named Alameda. I can't remember the guy's first name, but he was a former world champion. That's something.
UFC fighter?
No. Jiu-Jitsu world champion.
Sure.
I don't remember his first name.
'Cause I know he kind of moved around a little bit. I can't remember. I know he was with, but yeah, good guy. I like Larry. Wish him much more continued success. Did you know he had to be defibbed once on the mats? Like
I was there the day that I was training in there the day that he passed out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank God that there were Navy guys there.
So he was like on the brink of death. Like
really.
They had to go get the defibrillators.
And one of the guys, one of the Navy guys that were there, we had obviously a lot of Navy guys training in that area, jumped on him and started giving him mouth to mouth, because they realized he was in distress, and they gave him CPR, and they called the ambulance, and maybe they defibbed him in the ambulance, but thank God that the Navy guys were there.
I had heard, yeah. I wasn't there. I just heard he got defibbed. Like I heard it was that serious, But and then he's back to training. That didn't not long after. So
yeah. No, I was in the class that day that he went out. Yeah.
So what about your background? So let's go about you've been doing martial arts for quite a while.
Yeah, about 27 years now. So funny story, right? So I grew up watching Bruce Lee, in the Green Hornet, right? And of course, back in those days, nobody had ever seen anything like that, And then the other thing,
and he wasn't the star, right?
No, he wasn't the star. No, he really wasn't. He wasn't the star. And the other show that I used to watch was an old British show called The Avengers. And what was cool about it was they had a lot of spy TV on at that time, like The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Avengers, and things like that. And there was a woman in The Avengers, the female lead, Diana Rigg. She's now Dame Diana Rigg. She was, I guess that's the female version of a knight or something. She was knighted by the Queen. She's an actress. And it was one of the first times on television that a woman was portrayed as strong. And she was, karate chopping her way, across the screen. And it was I was like stunned watching this, And then on top of that, the Green. So I always had this interest in martial arts. So when I was 18 years old, I decided to take jiu-jitsu lessons, right? Not Brazilian jiu-jitsu, because in those days, the Brazilian jiu-jitsu was going on in Brazil, but it wasn't going on anywhere else. And so I went down to this local place, and I took a 6-month self-defense course. The teacher said that, the way that, we do this is you take the 6-month self-defense course, and then after that, if you like it, then you can train for the belts. And I said, okay, great, so we'll do the 6-month self-defense course. So I signed up for that. And I was just about done with the 6-month self-defense course, I wasn't 18, I was 17. And didn't have a car. So my father would drop me off and he would pick me up, right? So after class one day, I'm waiting for my father, and the teacher says to me, "Can you help me with my car? I'm rewiring the stereo system." And I said, "Sure." So he gets underneath the hood of his car, and he says to me, "Lay down on the floor of the car, under my dashboard on the driver's side." He says, "And when I shake the wires, pull the blue wire." So I get in there, I look, I pull the blue wire, his entire car goes up in smoke. When I pulled the wire, I don't know whether I pulled the wrong one or not, but I shorted the wire, and it burnt the entire electrical system up in his car. And of course, he got mad, And after that, I was such a shy kid, to begin. I just never went back because he got mad, and I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry," and I offered to pay for it and stuff.
Yeah, you told me to pull the blue wire.
But you told me to pull
Crap.
a blue wire. I pulled the blue
What's
wire,
this to do?
and I must have he must have hung up on something. I stripped the insulation on it. It shorted out, and it burnt the whole electrical system out in his car. So I never went back.
Yeah.
18 years later, at 36, a friend of mine across the street, I was married at that point, I had a house, and my neighbor across the street, a 50-year-old guy, and we were good friends. We were kind of compatible despite the age difference. He contracted stomach cancer, and he passed away fairly rapidly. And I guess I was at a sort of an impressionable age of 36, and I looked at that and I said, gee, there's a lot. Poor Don didn't get to see his kids graduate school and a bunch of other things. And I said, there's a lot of things in life I haven't done. I've always wanted a black belt in something. And so I went and signed up, basically, after Don passed away, I went and signed up, for Taekwondo lessons. And reason for Taekwondo is I had been an Olympic-style weightlifter for most of my life since I was about 14 years old. And at 36, I'm thinking, I'm getting kind of old now, and I need to do something for my heart. So I wanted to do something aerobic, and I thought to myself, well, for what I little bit I know about the martial arts, Taekwondo seems to be the most aerobic, so let me go do, Taekwondo. So we had a Taekwondo school in the neighborhood, and about 9 years later, I had a black belt in Taekwondo.
Holy crap! 9 years, you're slow.
Well, I was in a real Taekwondo school.
Right, I'm just joking. No,
Yeah.
What is it? Normally like 3 months or something.
Yeah,
right?
it was like 4 years or something like that. So,
Right.
so I walk in. That was an interesting story too, right? So I walk into the school. I'm 36 years old. So I said to the instructor, his name was Dave Levine, and I said, Dave, I said, so I'm like 36. Can I do this? So he says to me, well, he says, let me tell you. He says, you come in here, you train 3 days a week. He goes, in 6 months, I'll have you doing stuff you never believed you could do. And he was right about that. So then I asked the next dumb question that I'm sure you get, quite a bit. Well, how long to get a black belt? He says, unless you're super athletic and you're a natural athlete. I said, well, I'm not. I said, he says, in this school, he says, it's about 8 to 10 years if you train, 3 days a week. But then he said something that always stuck with me. He says, but, he says, what I want you to understand is, he says, it's not, he says, you won't understand this now. He says, but everybody thinks the black belt is the end. He says, the black belt is just the beginning. And, I've since, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt is my third black belt. And he was absolutely right about that. It wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. So I trained there until I was a brown belt. Was it a brown belt? Yes, I think it was a brown belt. And then I moved from Sayville, Long Island to Columbus, Ohio. Oh no, I'm sorry. First to Charlotte, North Carolina. And there I hooked up with a former world champion, Belvin Eves. He was the North American Sport Karate Association world champion 2 years in a row. And I trained with him for 2 years. He let me keep my belt. He didn't ask me to start over. He let me keep my brown belt. And I trained with him for 2 years, and he awarded me my black belt.
Mm-hmm.
So now, I've been at this about 9 years, and I'm kind of thinking, well, this really sort of wasn't what I was kind of looking for. I was kind of looking for self-defense. And, Taekwondo's response to any threat is knock them out.
Right.
Kick them, knock them out, hit them in the head, etc. And, a lot of situations that you actually run into in real life don't require you to knock anybody out.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, that might be the worst thing you could do.
Yeah, you're escalating.
Right. You're escalating from a legal perspective, and everything else, right? So I heard about all the Taekwondo guys seemed to worship the Hapkido guys. They talked about Hapkido as if it was like some mystical, magical, martial art. And Hapkido is Korean stand-up jiu-jitsu. It's like Japanese jiu-jitsu, but it's the Korean version of stand-up jiu-jitsu. And so I found a Hapkido master in Charlotte, and I left Taekwondo and I went over to train, with the Hapkido master. Now Hapkido, people confuse Hapkido with Aikido. Hapkido is a full-blown mixed martial art. Kicks, punches, throws, joint locks, even a little groundwork, about 8 to 10 techniques on the ground, really just designed to get you sort of the very most main Brazilian jiu-jitsu techniques they do on the ground.
Yeah.
And mostly just designed to get you back up on your feet. Right? And I did 8 years of that. How many years did I do in Charlotte? I don't know. I did about 6 years of that in Charlotte, maybe 7, and then moved again to Columbus, Ohio, and ended up getting awarded my black belt in Columbus, Ohio, and my second degree black belt a year after that, in that school. And so Hapkido has offensive and defensive techniques. I think it's a really excellent form of self-defense on your feet.
Yeah.
And then of course, now this takes us to probably 2002. And then, of course, the world in 2002 was still reeling from Hoist Gracie's wins.
Oh, yeah.
In the Ultimate Fighting Championship, which just, kind of blew me away. But I wasn't about to give up my Hapkido at that time, being somebody who generally doesn't quit stuff once he starts. And I liked the school I was in and everything. And then after I moved from Columbus down to Jacksonville, I couldn't find a decent Hapkido school. There was one instructor in town, and I knew way more than he did. I went over to his class, I watched the class, and I thought to myself, this is a far cry from, what I used to do. And then I said, well, maybe it's time to start over again. By the way, I started over at white belt with Hapkido. So after getting the black in Taekwondo, I started over at white with Hapkido. And then, of course, I started over at white again with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because, of course, it's totally different than than anything else. And so now I'm stuck on the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Did you ever try or think about opening up your own school for Hapkido?
No. Well, I am now that I'm kind of retired, but it's sort of I don't know. I just.
Do you think age would take away from your ability to teach? Like, I mean, can you still kick as good as you could kick? Or I mean, do you think that would be a factor in the success of your school?
No, I can still kick over my head. I have no problem with that. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of schools in the area. I think there are people in the area that are better qualified. Like Luis, right?
Yeah.
That have the competitive background that I don't have.
Yeah.
And so.
At one point,
it's an option for me maybe someday, but at this point in time, I don't have any real desire to teach it.
Yeah.
And I only ask this because I kind of find myself as I'd rather be the student the whole time. I don't know.
Well, there's so much to learn. I mean, that's
Right.
there's just. I mean, you could spend your whole life doing this and not know everything. And
Right.
and what I wanted, I took the ground stuff, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because I wanted to round out my kicking and punching, my general self-defense skills, and I didn't know anything on the ground. And, what the Gracies, of course, prove with the UFC is the ground is a pretty good place to be in a one-on-one fight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and so then after I got the black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I started to work with Juan Perez up on the west side with Kali. Because one of the other things I always wanted to do was weapons. And, you can do the Japanese weapons, or the Chinese weapons, but, most of that is not really realistic. Like, where are you going to find a pair of nunchucks, But Kali deals with kicks and empty hand as well as sticks and knives, and most of the emphasis is on sticks and knives, which is to me very practical because anything laying around is a stick, and knives are pretty much everywhere, right? So.
Now, is that the Filipino background?
Yeah, it's Filipino.
Filipino
Yeah,
martial
yeah.
arts? Two sticks?
Yeah, 2 sticks. And so I've been doing that for about a year now, and I'm enjoying that.
Yeah, that's the advanced. I mean, they do single stick and double stick, but yeah, double stick's like kind of more advanced.
Right.
You're moving up in the world when you got 2 sticks.
Yeah, we do double stick, single knife, double knife.
Yeah.
It's if anyone comes at you with a knife, the main lesson is just run the hell away.
Yeah.
No matter how well trained you are, don't stand there and do it unless you absolutely have no other choice at all. Just run the hell away.
Yeah.
Because you'll get cut. So no matter how good you are.
You brought up you were an Olympic lifter for a while. How long
Yeah.
did you do that?
I'm still doing it.
You're still lifting?
Yeah.
Still. That's what you do, right, Kylani?
Yeah, I do competitive Olympic weightlifting.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah.
Two-time state champ.
Wow,
2-time
congratulations.
state champ. I won youth nationals for my age and weight class in Atlanta, Georgia. And what else? I actually did a competition in Orlando with Camargo, Ollie Concepts. Have you ever heard of him?
No,
Danny.
no.
Well, he's like pretty much the president for the Florida Weightlifting Federation.
Oh, hot stuff.
Yeah, and
USAW.
Yeah.
So what are some of your numbers? Some of the weights you throw around.
So on my snatch, I snatch 78 kilos, which is 172 pounds. And then my clean and jerk right now is 98 kilos, which is 216 pounds.
Oh my God, you're stronger than me.
Yeah. But
That's great.
But realistically, I
Yeah.
should be hitting like way more. So at least like with the way I'm set up for now and like
Yeah.
how far I've come with my strength, it's just like I should be snatching like 80 kilos, which is like over like close to 180 pounds. I mean, it's over body weight, so anything over
Yeah.
body weight is already impressive.
Yeah. Well,
Especially for a
even
girl.
body weight is impressive.
Yeah.
Particularly for a girl. Yeah.
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 So, yeah, I'm still training for that, and then I started the whole jiu-jitsu thing too.
Could you imagine her like being like a solid purple belt with that kind of strength?
Yeah, that'd be
God
scary.
damn.
Really
Yeah.
scary. The So my best lifts lifetime was 185 pound snatch at a body weight of 185 pounds. So I was able to snatch my body weight.
Okay.
And a 245 pound clean and jerk, which believe it or not, I did at 43 years old.
Oh wow.
You know.
Did you ever
so.
do any like of the national meets like with USAW?
I
or were
only,
you just
I
training?
only competed once,
Mhm.
and I've been doing it. See again because when I started, you couldn't find a coach.
Yeah.
I mean, there was 1 or 2 coaches in the United States,
Yeah.
right? I mean, now I'm sure there's many more strength coaches, and it's a
Yeah.
more popular thing. But back in the day when I started, I was 14 years old when I started.
Yeah.
You couldn't find a coach.
Yeah. That makes
And
sense.
so I did compete in one powerlifting contest
Okay.
once. And I took 3rd place in a field of 8 people, my body weight.
Mm-hmm.
I weighed 145 pounds that day. I deadlifted 450.
That's good.
Which is more than triple my body weight. I squatted 405. And my bench press, which always sucked because of my long arms, I bench pressed 250 that day. My lifetime best bench press was only 270 again, because look at this. I mean, this is like completely
Yeah.
the wrong,
Yeah, it's hard.
the wrong, forget it.
I've got a little movement, so
But my lifetime best deadlift was 475, and my lifetime best squat was 420, all at a body weight of generally probably about body weight about 165.
Yeah.
So that was some pretty good lifting, for an amateur.
I can tell
Yeah.
you're a lot better with the slower movements compared
Yeah,
to
the
Olympic
faster ones.
weightlifting.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I first started weightlifting, I was better at squatting and deadlifting and
Yeah.
benching. That was just kind of like I think I was more made for. Because in Olympic weightlifting, if you want to be, usually the really good lifters are short.
Yes.
Just less distance from the ground,
In fact, if you wouldn't mind, would you put your arm over your head like this?
like that.
Yeah, you see, good weightlift. See where her elbow is relative to the top of her head? If your elbow is below the top of your head, you have the right body proportions to be an Olympic lifter because you have the appropriate leverages in your body.
Yeah.
Versus this. Look, see, it's way the hell above my head.
Yeah,
right?
just like
That's
longer
terrible.
arms, just the more distance that bar has to travel.
Yeah.
Especially when it's like really heavy weight, it's
Yeah.
just flying up there.
Yeah, but there was a time when my biggest problem. So of course things change, when you age,
Yeah.
right? So my late 20s, early 30s, was probably the height of my. Other than the fact that I did do the 245 when I was 43 years old, which shocked the shit out of me the day I did it. I
Yeah.
thought to myself, this is amazing. But my best weightlifting days were in my late 20s to my early 30s, because generally speaking, it's an old person's sport. You can do it for a long time.
Yeah.
Then what I've noticed since I've aged is my joints, the connective tissue in my body is more brittle. And the reason I know that is that I've snapped some of them from time to time. And the muscles remain strong, but the blood flow to the cartilage in the joints decreases with age,
Yeah.
and you lose the elasticity. And when I have a bar racked in,
Yeah.
and I'm jerking it today, I can actually feel the difference in my elasticity, or remember the elasticity I used to have versus what I have today.
Yeah.
And you get a certain amount of recoil and bounce from that elasticity in those ligaments and things when you're younger than you do, when you're older. So I still I'm on you may be aware of this, but I'm on a 5-3-1 system.
Okay.
You know what a 5-3-1 system is?
Is that like some type of deload system?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
deloading system.
Yeah.
And
So 1 week you're probably doing like 5 rep type movements, and then
right. I'm
next
doing
week
5 reps, with increasing weight,
Yeah.
and then I'm doing
3 reps.
3 reps with higher percentages, and then 5-3-1 with higher percentages still.
Yeah.
And then I deload, right? I do a really
Which is-
light week,
Yeah.
right? And maybe 60% of my one rep max, and that, as I've aged,
Yeah.
has worked for me very well
Yeah.
compared to what I used to do when I was your age and younger, where I just used to, do like sort of 5 sets of 2 reps and work up to failure, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's not always good to like go heavy like that.
No.
I've only been doing like weightlifting for like 2.5 years, probably going on to my 3rd year now, and just like noticing how you can't be 100% all the time. Like
you
it's
can't.
not gonna happen. And my coach like constantly reminds me, because like right now my squats actually like kind of gone down, and I'm just sitting here like, why is that? And my coach is like, you're not gonna squat double body weight 24/7. Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't happen. It's just
Right.
science. Your body will not let you. You need to you need to pull back and then do a program, rebuild yourself, and then come back stronger.
Right, exactly. Now, do you know how the strongest men in the world lift the most weight over their head? How they train to do that?
No.
They increase they make very, very small increments in the weight. They'll use those
The kilo.
quarter kilo
Yeah.
weights,
Yeah.
and they'll increase the bar by 1.25 pounds, a pound and a quarter in the training. Like they won't jump up 5 pounds.
Yeah.
So if you don't have any, 3/4 pound plates, half
Well, that's why
pound
it's in
plates,
kilos
quarter pound
and not
plates,
pounds, because we
right.
can only do 5-pound jumps. but-
Right, you can only do 5, but you want the smaller kilo plates,
Yeah.
because over 100 pounds, what the science says is that your body can't recognize a 1 pound difference.
Yeah.
And that's why you see the world records generally creeping up and up and up and up by like I think the minimum in the International Weightlifting Federation is I think it's a pound and a half or something, or a kilo, 1 kilo.
At least 1 kilo.
1 kilo, yeah. And it's because it
2 pounds makes a difference, and you can break a world record.
Yeah, 2 pounds
You'd be
makes a
surprised.
huge difference in doing your max. So, no, it's fantastic. Well, good for you. I mean, keep it up. I've been doing it my entire life, and while I don't, because of injuries I've had, I don't, really push myself to the physical limits anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But at your age, man, have a good time. You got 20 years at least to
I know.
keep going with it if you want.
When I
That's
found
fantastic.
When I found her coach, I was driving her to training,
Yeah.
so that she can get better, and she could tell you the story of how she came up in high school. I found her coach. But anyways, I was in the gym with her while she was training with the coach. I'd go off to the side, because he didn't mind me training there. And I'm deadlifting 400 and trying to do a back squat and trying to put up big numbers. And I'm like, wait a minute, man, I'm starting to get pretty old here. Like, do I really, who am I?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to compete. Do I really need to put on 500, and back squat that and just beat up my knees? So, I still lift and I still work out.
Even Coach Greg, he lifted a lot when he was younger, and then he's like, I don't care. I don't care to squat over 400 pounds. I'm like, it's none of my business anymore. I'm not built to do this. Like, it's not my problem. I'll do. He's gone through like knee surgeries and stuff and like all kinds of stuff. He doesn't want anything to deal with that.
Yeah. So do you know who Vasily Alexiev was?
No.
He's the first man in human history to lift 500 pounds over his head. And he did it in about, if memory serves me correctly, 1970. So back in those days, the Russians, because the
Yeah.
Russians had all the best drugs,
Oh yeah.
they were the world weightlifting, champions. And weightlifting in Russia is like a national sport. I mean, it's like baseball and football
Like
here.
same in
right?
China.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say China now.
And China.
They're really good at hiding
Yeah.
the fact that they have all their athletes
Oh,
on drugs,
yeah,
too. So.
exactly. Well, so I worked out in a gym one time with a guy who was the 10th best power lifter in the world in the rankings at the time, and his name was Mitch McNano. And I asked him, I said, Mitch, I said, so like, what do you do to, how do you compete at such an elite level? And he says, I take big risks on drugs. He goes the biggest. He goes the guys who lift the biggest weights are the guys taking the biggest risks on the drugs.
Yep.
But anyway, be that as it may, so Vasily Alexiev was the first man in human history to lift 500 pounds over his head, and in 1972, the World Weightlifting Championships were held in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I lived on Long Island at the time. So I got my wife and a couple of friends in the car, and I said, we're going to go see this because this is like, and of course it was a real subculture then. It's still a subculture, but it was a real subculture back then. I said, well, we're going to go to Gettysburg and we're going to go watch the World Weightlifting Championships. And I was like in heaven, right? So I go into Gettysburg, 1972. It's a small town, and here's like all of these incredibly famous weightlifters walking around. I mean, names if you never heard of Vasily Alexiev, Yuri Vardanyan, I don't remember some of the names now, but guys who were just absolutely physically incredible, right? David Rigger, all of these guys were walking around buying up all the jeans in Gettysburg, because in Russia at the time you couldn't get jeans, so they'd buy up all the jeans in all the department stores, and they would sell them on the black market, back in Russia. So I'm seeing all these, so we're driving down the street in Gettysburg, and I said, oh, stop, look at that, there's Sultan Rachmanov, who was the world record holder in the snatch in the super heavyweight category a long time ago. Anyway, so we pull into the Holiday Inn to have lunch, and who is sitting on the second story of the Holiday Inn Motor Lodge was Vasily Alexiev. He was sitting out there, and I saw him, and I said to my wife and my friends, I said, oh, that's Alexiev, I gotta go get a picture. Right. So I run up, I grab my camera, and I run up towards the balcony, and two of his KGB guards come out, and they chased me away. So,
So you didn't get a picture?
I got a picture, but it's a little sloppy because they're yelling at me in Russian, and like, don't bother him, I'm running away. Now, he lost that competition, which was one of the first times he had dominated the world for 10 years, and he did not win that competition. Had been the first time.
Did he
in
place
10
at
years.
all?
Yeah, of course.
I believe he placed like second or third, but he didn't win, which was a shock because he was the clear favorite, to win. Now, have you ever seen an international weightlifting competition?
In person?
Yeah.
No, but
You've seen it on
technology nowadays, there's live streams all the time.
okay.
They're really good with live streaming all the major competitions.
Yeah.
The last World Championships was actually this year in Anaheim, California.
Okay.
So everybody was going to California, and the setup, it's crazy because like the setup, there's like strobe lights, like fog machines, like when the lifters are going up, like it's crazy now because they have like the platforms ready and lights and then special effects, big screens behind them, all the totals, like.
Yeah. Well, so if you've watched it live stream, I don't know whether you picked this up, but it's the craziest audience you can ever sit in any kind of an event. Because what happens is that when the lifter gets 3 minutes to do a lift when he touches the platform,
Well, now you have, whenever it's your time to go on the platform, so your number's called, usually it's 1 minute to get on the platform. The bar needs to be
addressed
above your knee by the time the minute is up.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it used to be, what I remember from many years ago, is that you had 3 minutes, the lifter had 3 minutes to complete the lift once his foot touched the platform. Mm-hmm. So what would happen is they'd announce the lifter, he'd come out, he'd chalk up, and the crowd would be going crazy, yelling, screaming, cheering and stuff, right? He'd walk up to the bar, he'd address the bar, which basically means he'd bend down and put his hands out, dead silence. People would be going from screaming their bloody heads off to
nothing.
Dead silence.
Right, yeah.
And then the guy, he'd clean it. As soon as he landed the clean, they go batshit again, and they're screaming,
And
right?
then he gets ready for the jerk.
Then he gets ready for the jerk. Dead silence, and then he jerks it, or he misses it, and as soon as he does the jerk, people go batshit again.
Like,
so it's like,
Yeah.
it's the craziest audience you can ever sit in.
I
Anyway.
like how you hype it up. I like how, and like, can express like how it really is, because it's just such an unappreciated sport. There's no money in weightlifting.
There's no money
still
in it,
to this
no.
day, there's still
Right.
like no money in it,
Right.
and it's such an interesting thing to watch. No, it's not a football game, which is pretty much like everyone wants to see that, but it's crazy, and the time that these athletes put. Like times that like even myself and my team that we put in just like better. It's like at the end of the day, it's for yourself.
So no, I absolutely agree that it's a very internal sport, and there isn't a dime in it. And what's always intrigued me about it is the fact that people were pushing the limits of what's humanly possible.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the other thing I used to do, which you would get a kick out of if you ever get a chance to do it, is living in Columbus, Ohio. That they host every year the world's largest fitness exposition, the Arnold Fitness Expo.
Oh yeah.
Because
There's money with that one.
There's money in that, right? So what happens is all of these fitness companies come in from all over the country, and they set up booths. And of course, they hire all the major bodybuilders to, to come help hawk their wares, right?
Right.
And but they also have a major weightlifting contest, a major powerlifting contest, and they have a strongman contest, right? And you can see, all this on the internet. And it was $10 admission. It was the greatest freak show on earth to go in and see for $10.
I want to say it's a little bit more than $10 nowadays.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, last time
and they have. I mean, they hold the
Have you
Arnold
been?
Classic. No, but I've always wanted to. Like I've been.
No. The entrance to the exposition's $10. The classic is more expensive. You actually go see the contest. It's more
Right.
expensive. I'm just
Okay.
talking about getting in to the exposition
Just the
because
expo.
you can walk around and you can meet. I met Jack LaLanne.
Okay, I remember him.
I met Lou Ferrigno. Lou Ferrigno used to play the Incredible Hulk on TV.
Incredible, yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's. I got close to Arnold, but I didn't get to shake his hand.
Him and Lou were pretty much in competition with each other back when.
Well, no, the main guy that Arnold used to compete with was a guy in the early days, was a guy named Sergio Oliva, who was a Chicago cop that had the most unbelievable physique I've ever seen in my life. And I met Sergio, which was to me, was like meeting Mickey Mantle or
Right.
Joe Namath or any of the old sports heroes from my day, or Tiger Woods. It was incredible to meet Sergio Oliva. On the martial arts side, then a few years into this, they also started doing major martial arts competitions now. So they have jiu-jitsu competitions, karate competitions. And I met Bong Soo Han, who was one of the pioneers of Hapkido in the United States. I met Bill Superfoot Wallace, who was one of the main kickboxing champions in the early days of kickboxing. I met Bob Wall, who was the guy with the scar who co-starred in the
Enter the Dragon.
in the Enter the Dragon movies with
that.
Bruce Lee.
Right.
Who else did I meet? Then in the bodybuilders, I met all the classical greats: Frank Zane, Sergio Oliva, Franco Colombo, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I didn't meet Arnold, but I got real close. He was governor at the time of California, so you couldn't get too close to him. Jack LaLanne, who back in the 50s, started the whole fitness craze in the United States. And so I met the other guy, Kung Lee, the Chinese Sancho, I think they call it Sanchu fighter. It's kickboxing where you're allowed to take your opponent off his feet. And Kung Lee was just an amazing Sanchu fighter. I forget how you pronounce it. Used to watch him on television all the time. So you get to walk around, and then the bodybuilders were some of the bodybuilders that you would meet. And I have pictures. I have a lot of pictures of all of this, where it was just incredible. I met Coleman, Ronnie Coleman, who was Mr.
Somebody
Olympia.
like 6 to 7 times.
6, 7, 8, 9 times, something
yeah,
like
it's
that.
ridiculous. He's got the biggest
And his main competitor, Jay Cutler.
Jay Cutler.
So, and then another guy who was up there with the famous bodybuilders, Dorian Yates. The thing I'll remember.
legs on Dorian. No, Tom Platz was
That
the
was
legs.
Tom Platz was the legs. Yeah, I met Tom Platz too. But the thing I remember about Dorian Yates more than anything else was I was standing next to him and I realized that his deltoid was bigger than my head.
Wow.
This guy was enormous. He was 280, and just cut to ribbons. I mean, it was unbelievable. But the coolest thing about the strength competitions at the Arnold was one year I was watching it, and there was a guy attempting to squat 1,000 pounds.
Doable.
And he did the 1,000. Well, we saw several guys squat 1,000 pounds and a little bit more. But this one guy who tried to squat the 1,000 pounds, he missed it and he let the bar drop. He jumped out from under the bar. You have no idea what 1,000 pounds hitting the floor sounds like.
I picture it just going through the platform.
It just went down, and it made this thunderous noise, boom, and it didn't even vibrate. It just like it stuck to the floor. It's like boom, down it went. But so if you ever get a chance, spend time in Columbus, Ohio at the Arnold. It's the greatest fitness exposition and strength contests, I guess, on the face of the earth in terms of, and they do a lot of martial arts too. They do a lot of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And
They have like little tiny competitions.
they have competitions, yeah.
Yep.
So
Maybe it's something we
it's
gotta.
cool.
My
Definitely something you should do.
So my first youth nationals I qualified for was in Austin, Texas, and it was in this big convention center. One whole side of the convention center had like 3 platforms for the national meet going on, but the other side had like this whole fit expo, like fit.
With the powerlifting.
Yeah,
section.
powerlifting, jiu-jitsu. Like there was like martial arts there. Remember? Because we saw people like rolling and fighting. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
No, there was people there. Because I was just like, this is so crazy. Like there's like a powerlifting meet going on, and there's like 2 guys like wrestling over here. Like probably like I didn't know what it was, so probably
they do
like,
something
jiu-jitsu or
here
something.
in Orlando because I've competed in the Torque grappling games.
Yeah.
And when you go into this exposition, they also have every type of athletic thing.
Yeah.
They have judo competition going
Mm-hmm.
on. They have weightlifting. They have CrossFit. They do something similar here every year in Orlando.
We should.
Sounds
go.
like we can hit every event. Like I'll do the powerlifting.
I'll do the Olympic
We'll get Alex to
weightlifting.
do the powerlifting because
right.
he showed me
Yeah.
a video. I didn't know.
Doesn't Alex do
Alex
Olympic
is-
weightlifting
Alex, he does it
too?
in his
Yeah,
in his garage.
He's
He
jacked.
showed me,
He's strong as shit.
Yeah.
Holy
Yeah, he
crap.
told me.
And then you can do jiu-jitsu.
He doesn't even need technique.
So, so in my one powerlifting my one contest I was ever in was a powerlifting contest, and I got 3rd place in a field of 8, And the two guys who beat me were regular AAU competitors.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, that's pretty, for somebody who just kind of came in off the street, I thought that was, pretty good. So,
Yeah.
That was my
was-
one time
So,
competing. So,
Flex over here, Florida Extreme, I was telling you about it. That was, I have a friend, and he's my age, and he actually does powerlifting competitively. And I don't know how the powerlifting federation works. I know there's one federation where you can use steroids, and then there's another federation where it's drug-free. But, so he was...
I want to say you can use it. They probably just don't test, or they frown upon it.
No, they test. They test, but he's. I think he's with the side where it's like you don't use drugs, but I'm not 100% sure. But pretty much it's like a whole team that trains at Flex, and he offered to work out. So I was like, okay, sure. Right now my gym's down, or at the time my gym was down, so I went to go work out there because they have a little bit of stuff I can work with to do my thing, and like it's just crazy. Powerlifters are a whole breed of like weightlifters. It's so crazy. They're just like so much more testosterone in the air, like just so it's just like yelling and slapping and really tight like outfits, like singlets on these huge gross men, and I'm just like they're just like
no lunk alarm in there, like Planet Fitness?
Like this was not
lunks
Planet
only.
Fitness.
There would be there'd be a no lunk alarm. If you're not a lunk, don't even come in here.
Yeah.
The best the best powerlifting gym in the United States is.
No.
It's the West Side Barbell Club in Columbus,
West Side
Ohio.
Barbell.
It's, yeah,
And
West
I've
Side.
I lived in Columbus, but I never went over to West Side. I mean, I wouldn't even dare walk in there, but because the guys that are all in there, they're
Yeah.
all monsters, world
Yeah.
record holders, just lifting crazy.
I actually watched
crazy
a
weights.
documentary that the guy who owns West Side Barbell, I watched a documentary on him, and he obviously he had a lot of problems with drug abuse and like went to jail, just like really terrible life, and then he started lifting, just found that and just built his life upon that, and then he's like, it's not easy to get into this gym, just you can't just walk in here and lift with us. Like you need to come from somewhere, you need to like I need to know your story before I even allow you to like train in this place. And they don't even have fancy stuff, they have like old really rusty equipment, but they still I think that just gives them character.
What was that gym that I took you to in LA? Waxman's?
Oh, so Waxman's weightlifting.
Yeah, that was a cool gym.
Sean Waxman, he's one of the more popular Olympic weightlifting coaches nowadays, and he has a few athletes who have gone to international competitions, and they have a really good setup out there. If anything, like Olympic weightlifting is pretty popular on West Coast. It's like West Coast and then East Coast, especially in Florida. There's a lot of gyms. But nowadays, like CrossFit has blown up weightlifting.
Right.
For sure.
All the money and the sponsors
Go to CrossFit.
right now.
Right.
Yeah.
The good weightlifters are in CrossFit.
Yeah.
Because that's where the money is.
And then a lot of CrossFitters will like move to weightlifting. So that's kind of why it's gotten more popular nowadays. Obviously, it wasn't as popular whenever
there was
you
no
first
CrossFit
started.
when I first started. No, there was
but now,
nothing. I mean,
now if you have a beard and tattoos, you're qualified to be
I
a
didn't know there's
CrossFit
money in
coach.
CrossFit. There's money in CrossFit.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
yeah. Jesus, there's
Yeah.
a ton of money in CrossFit.
If you
I've never
win
heard
cross-
of a famous CrossFitter. I didn't know this.
Oh,
It's
you
just-
must,
it's
you
just
must
like
not
one
get
whole
Men's Health
community.
magazine. They're always on the cover of that. And
There's a Netflix thing.
Switching
Strongest
gears
Man.
a little bit. You know what did blow my mind though? And
What?
I didn't know until a few years ago about the podcast community, right? I'm doing this to have fun, right?
Yeah.
And if it turned into something, that would be awesome. But my son was 14 at the time. He moved here from Germany, and he started telling me what these podcasters are make. And he starts talking about a guy named PewDiePie. Have you ever heard of PewDiePie?
PewDiePie!
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Have you ever heard of PewDiePie?
I
No.
love PewDiePie.
So this
he
guy
does
makes, like,
podcast?
He's like the most successful podcaster in the
Joe
world.
Rogan
He makes
was
like
amazing.
$7 million a
Well,
year.
listen, PewDiePie first started, I grew up watching PewDiePie. So he actually got really popular off YouTube. He is the most subscribed
that's-
YouTuber.
yeah.
He has like over 63 million subscribers. So that's
Joe's
why
got like
his
3.2 million.
This
Yeah.
guy, this kid's got 63.
Yeah, he's
He's
the
like-
number one.
he's like 20 something too.
And if you watch his podcasts, I mean, he acts like a kid. He just
Yeah.
totally unscripted. Just I'm not even going to try to imitate him because I'll just make a fool out of myself.
No, do it.
No,
I'm just kidding.
I mean the dude's just—he's a fool, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say that he's having fun, right? But the point of it is he's not even trying. He's just
Yeah.
like going on there, just whatever comes to his brain, he just blurts out. And it's not. It's by no means an intellectual show.
It's funny because like I watch his videos, so I know exactly because he just says the most stupidest stuff.
That's not the one her sister and her talk about. They conversate about this YouTube
There's
channel.
this
and I'm wondering if that's
There's this guy. His name is David Dobrik, and he's a real popular YouTuber as well. He has like 8 million subscribers on YouTube, and him and another guy in the videos, Jason Nash, they do a podcast together separately called Views. And actually now they got a full sponsorship from Spotify. So Spotify holds all of their podcasts now, so I listen to them. And it's pretty much, so they do these crazy stuff in the videos, like pranks on their friends, just like crazy stuff. So pretty much on that podcast, they just go behind the scenes of that.
Yeah.
So they go behind the scenes and then describe it, like anything that happened, like cops showed up, someone really got hurt. They'll just talk about that in the podcast. So of course, a lot of their subscribers will go to the podcast because they're probably like interested in like, so what else happened,
right.
you know?
I thought about Facebook Live in our podcast today, or Instagram Live or something. But
Yeah, well, I'm going to go live with this. I've been working on the technicalities, everything that's involved. I wanted to get the podcast. Right now, it's a learning phase for me.
Yeah.
And that's where it starts.
Yeah.
Holy shit! I went back and looked at Joe Rogan's first podcast. It was
it
the
bad?
shittiest thing on the face of the planet. It was just a shit like. It just went to. I looked at that and said, "Holy crap! If he can get from there to
here.
where he's at now,
Yeah.
anyone can do it." And then if you look at PewDiePie, the first thing you ask yourself is, am I intelligent enough to be captivating, right? But then you look at PewDiePie and you're like, all right, well, intelligence obviously is not a factor.
But it just depends on like the type of crowd you're trying to attract.
Yeah.
That's the thing, because his crowd is just a bunch of
kids, I
stupid
think.
14-year-old kids, probably like
And
14 to 17.
And he's an older guy. I mean,
Yeah.
relatively speaking to the 14-year-olds, right? He's
Yeah.
Yeah.
He knows, and the thing about it is he knows his crowd is like internet kids, just online gaming kids, complete memes, like.
But as I went deeper into just researching podcasting, right, and researching, actually, what got me thinking about it 3 years ago, we kind of changed gears for a second. 3 years ago, I started gathering the equipment. The biggest problem is that I actually am not comfortable putting myself out there, right? I'm a private person, and I really enjoy deep conversations with friends on the outside, but I say a lot of stupid shit. We all do. We're human,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and it's like when you throw yourself out there and you say some stupid shit, you can't take off. It's out there
You
on
feel
the
a little,
internet.
yeah.
So that's incredibly, intimidating. And but then I started looking at some of these podcasts, and they're like, just throw yourself out there, be stupid, make mistakes.
Yeah.
And then you see podcasts out there. There are YouTube channels, and me, I don't
Yeah.
differentiate between a pod. There's a video podcast, there's audio podcast,
Yeah.
there's YouTube, whatever. It's all the same thing, right? There's YouTube channels of people that have millions of subscribers, and they do nothing but take toys, and they're just like,
Yeah,
walk
and kids
up.
freaking
And
love
kids
it.
are loving
Well,
it.
it's because
They're just like,
parents give their phones to a bunch of 3-year-olds, and
Yeah.
that's what they watch the whole time.
Yeah. Oh, like
No,
my
I mean,
Does Ushi
my
watch
girl,
videos?
my 2.5 years old, holy shit, she can work an iPad better than anyone. She scrolls.
Yeah.
She's 2, and she started this at 2. She picks, and we don't let her on it all the time. Obviously, I don't want her to get, but at the same time, I do want her to have a grasp on technology.
Yeah.
And there are times when we're busy and it appeases her, and we're watching what she's watching. But she'll go, no, I'm looking for some dinosaur shit. Dinosaur.
Oh my God.
there you go.
the best one is the video of her mom opens up the cabinet, and she's like in this underneath the kitchen cabinet or something
With
like
a
that.
tablet.
With a tablet, like watching dinosaurs.
She is so funny.
The one it's not a podcast, but the one I like is Bat Dad on Facebook. If you
Oh,
see
he's
Bat
great.
Oh my God,
dude.
my little
I
brother.
love
He's,
Bat
he's
Dad.
great.
yeah.
Yeah, he's great.
Bat
Yeah.
Dad. He just
But
puts
it's
Always messing with his wife, and
Yeah.
his kids are cussing at him and telling him shut the fuck up. Like, it's hilarious.
it's
Yeah.
great.
I
So-
think the reason why people try to act like more themselves, and the people who put themselves out there the most get the most views, because like I feel like people nowadays just like kind of trying to want to escape from like whatever they have, and some people are just bored and they're more interested in other people's lives, so then when they do see content that seems a little bit more realistic, they can like actually relate to that.
Right, or the people get offended. Like, did you watch the Elon Musk?
That pisses me off.
And the
It
marijuana
actually
and the
pisses me
response
off.
to him, taking a couple hits off a cigarette cigarette, tobacco mixed with marijuana, and the whole world's flipping out. You got
world's
people
flipping
like
out.
fucking pulling
Driving
out
the stock
stocks of
price down, yeah.
SpaceX.
All right.
But what I see these
Ridiculous.
are, and I don't want to offend anyone here. I hope no one's so religious but I have friends that I have friends that are like, they think smoking cannabis is a sin. Look at the president of the Philippines, Duterte, right? He will kill you for smoking pot. That's
Yes.
a death sentence. That's punishable by death.
Ridiculous.
It's 2018. You can't do that anymore.
And forget that. Like, cannabis is medicine. Like, if we want to talk about cannabis for a second, what we used to be, prior to this technological civilization that we are right now, our forefathers were, Indians, or they were, they smoked the peace pipe,
They're
right?
smoking peyote.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
They're smoking peyote,
Yeah,
which is an hallucinogenic. I mean, you know.
well, mushrooms,
Yeah.
cannabis, ayahuasca, DMT. That to me is medicine, and I can't stand that. There's hypocrites out there that'll drink alcohol daily, and then they'll slam you like, oh, I can't invest in your company. You're smoking cannabis, bro. That's man-made.
Yeah.
Cannabis was put on this. It's a natural thing on this planet, and it kills cancer. It has the benefits are unreal. Cannabis, it stops Crohn's disease. It stops seizures. It has so many advantages, and people have no idea.
Yeah.
They just think that.
Because
Show me-
that's what everybody from higher up says. It's so bad. You're not allowed to do this. Like, we're gonna punish you.
It's a federal
And-
offense
and-
because it's not.
Like,
and-
that makes no sense.
Well, it does.
Well,
That was
yeah.
all about rich people
Texas.
getting paid for prisons, right? Our prisons are full of cannabis sellers and buyers,
I know, that's
and
so
that's
Right.
what it's
No, I
full
know.
of, right?
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
making these people.
Yeah.
Prisons a privatized business,
Yeah.
and the prison owners are loaded, right?
Yep.
They're making.
A guy selling
Making a
weed
ton
is
of
in
money.
the same place as a guy who probably like raped or killed a woman. Like, that's
If I were
insane.
president, I'd let everyone out immediately.
Well, it's
If you
moving
were-
in the right direction, right? It's
I don't
more,
know. I
More
don't
and
know.
more states
There's-
are legalizing it. You know.
What was interesting what Elon said, and I watched that. Of course, I was going to watch that because Elon to me is a genius. We can't look the guy sitting there talking about what it takes. He's like off the top of his head, MG over MC, the amount of thrust you need to. This guy's a genius. Either that or he's just making shit up. But someone will bust him, I would imagine. But
Drinking the Kool-Aid, but
he
not.
said 300 out of 1,000,000 are pure evil. But he gave me hope that he believes it's 50-50. He's like he thinks that, for the amount of evil we have in the world, we have the same amount of good, right? You have pure good, you have pure evil, and for 300 pure evil people, you have 300 pure good people, and then same thing for that entire
Yeah, see,
split.
I'm more optimistic than that. I've traveled all over the world, and to some pretty far-flung places that a lot of people, don't travel to. And, I found that, most people just want to live peaceful lives. There's a handful of assholes every place that screw it up for everybody else. But, I've been, in 1993, I was in the third poorest country in the world, and the people I met who had nothing, nothing, would give you the shirts off their back.
Yeah.
And they weren't looking for trouble, and but for a handful of, assholes, it would be a better place. And so one of the benefits, at least of all the travel I think I've done is you do get to experience the world and cultures that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. And you see how people become happy, stay happy, and basically just want to live, just want to be sort of left alone to live their existence, whatever that might be. And so I'm more optimistic than,
I
just
saw a
300
video.
really good people.
I saw a video. A friend of mine is he's a SWAT. I have a few friends that are SWAT in the Philippines, in Visayas, and they post videos that get taken down pretty quickly. And I don't watch them anymore because I kind of accidentally watched the first one or two before I realized it. Man, I couldn't stop when I watched the first one, but I would never want to watch it again. But it was in Mindanao, and I'll just share this video. I'm not going to share the video. I'm going to share the story of the video. But these 3 or 4, I guess they were Muslims or Islamists or whatever you call. I don't know what you call them, but they're Filipinos living in southern the Philippines, and they captured some Christians. And these Christians had done nothing but Filipinos. These are Filipinos, got 3 other Filipinos, and they slit their throats just right on camera, just held and they were laughing, and they'd take the camera and like, look, he's peeing, it's being translated because they're not talking English,
Yeah.
but you could see the translations. Ha ha, he shit his pants.
Wait, the SWAT team?
And what? No. This is just
Evidence.
yeah. This
Evidence.
is just 3 Muslim Filipinos killing in the most horrendous way you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
The one, he put the guy on the ground, stepped on his head, and then just kicked the knife through his throat. It was the most violent thing I'd ever seen in my life. And those 3 were just laughing. They were laughing so hard and I thought, that is pure evil. That is like
absolutely.
the purest evil that there is. Those guys were just laughing while the only thing those 3 guys had done was that they were Christian. That was it. They were just Christian. That was what they did. That was their offense.
Yeah.
And so there is. Now my experience in the Philippines, it was one of the most beautiful places I'd ever been. I thought the people were super, super friendly. Third world country, and I did find that I think they're in general happier. Like Filipinos are like, they may be poor, but the family time that they enjoy, like they don't realize it. They have no idea what they have.
Yeah.
Every night, even though they have nothing, they what they do is they manage to have food every night, and they're with their family, and they drink and they sing. All Filipinos sing in karaoke. And,
Still here. We're still doing it
bro,
here.
if you haven't been there, I spent 2 years in the Philippines, and I absolutely loved it. And but there's some frustrations, and we're talking about doing a Filipino podcast. My wife and I want her to get her friends on and to kind of educate the Philippines.
That'd probably be the most funniest thing ever.
Well, because they have these misconceptions. One of the frustrating things about having a Filipino wife, the Filipino culture is that if you're a Filipino who moves to the U.S., you support your family, and this is normal. This is anyone who has a Filipino wife knows this. They know that you got to send back money. The misconception they have is that we're all rich. Like they think that if you're in America, you're just killing it with money. Like you have 10,000 extra a month to just throw. And like for example, my wife will send back $500 a month, and her family won't talk to her. Like her sisters have disowned her because it's just not enough. They think she's cheap. They think she's just a cheap ass Filipina who's only sending back $500 a month. And I'm just like, that's after taxes. We're in a high tax bracket.
Right,
That's like $700, $800 a month.
Cost of living is not cheap.
And we still send balik bayan boxes.
Yeah.
We still send, and
Nice.
yeah, they have this serious misconception about, you're in America, you're just making gobs and gobs of money. So what I want to do is actually do a podcast and have one day a week where we do this Filipino podcast. See some Filipino friends.
Oh,
out
that
there.
would probably get a lot of views. I don't know. There's a lot of Filipinos in America, and then like a lot of people who are like interested in Filipino culture.
So let's change gears. Let's talk about travel.
Okay.
What all continents have you been to?
Every place except Antarctica.
It's a hard place to go to.
Antarctica? Well, Antarctica, I don't have a lot of desire to go to Antarctica. I mean, after I get done with everything else.
I do.
I want to fly over it.
After I get done with everything else that I want to see, I'll go to I'll go to Antarctica. But until then, I've still got a few places left to see.
Are you familiar with the Antarctic Treaty? Just since you brought it up.
No,
I think that's so
conspiracy
interesting. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about
the
it.
Antarctic Treaty?
Yeah, like
Are you familiar with it?
I am
we're
not. No.
No one's allowed. Like everyone's made an agreement. Don't go over in a car.
Here we go.
Why?
Well, so here's the thing.
Let's get in on it because I'm curious.
Here's the thing. It's the number is between 50 and 54 countries, but I think it was in the 50s we made this agreement. I believe it was like, I think it was in the 50s. But there's this long-standing agreement, and it continues to go. You can look it up, the Antarctic Treaty. But basically, any country that's a country, unless it's just like, I don't know, Zimbabwe or something. But basically, every country that has the capacity to go to Antarctica agreed on a treaty that no one's allowed to go there. So if you're a citizen of any country, really, you have to get a visa you have to get approval to go to Antarctica, and when you do, you can only go to this one little tip that goes out just below South America, that little tip.
Yeah.
You can't go on any expedition across Antarctica. Like, you're not allowed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
There's you'll get turned around at gunpoint. And that's why. So here's the thing: is this treaty doesn't? We don't have this for any other mass of land in the world. Why do we have that for the most extreme mass of land that we have? Like, this is a place we don't have to worry about people going to. People can't even get there, and if you get there, you don't have the supplies to go anywhere. You don't have the. We don't have. It's the most extreme conditions you can fathom, and we need a treaty between all these countries? Why would that be? Like, you have. But then, what that does is that makes you go out and look at other things that you would consider ludicrous and start to reconsider them. Last night, I'm getting ready to lose all my viewers, all 3.
I'm still here.
Every once in a while, I go out and watch flat Earth videos. I do it, and I got turned onto a channel last night called Odd TV, and I don't know the guy's name. At first, I was kind of, man, the guy's done some research. He may not be the most eloquent speaker. He may not be, he obviously didn't go to Harvard. But the guy had an open mind, and he did some research. And there's a lot of people out there. There's Eric Dubai. There's Mark Sargent. But they, like another example. Let me ask you a question. We're going to switch gears again.
I want to tell you a story about Antarctica before we leave the topic. So go ahead.
We're not leaving Antarctica. Don't worry. Do you think we've been to the moon?
Oh, absolutely.
I don't believe we have. Oh, I'm so convinced that we haven't.
I worked for the people who put us there. That's how I know. My first job out of college was with Grumman Aerospace. They built the Lunar Excursion Module, and the 2 guys I worked for did the Earth simulation software for the Lunar Excursion Module, and they basically had. I started with them in 1978, and the space, I think the moon landings were over in 77, but basically they were full of stories.
I would bet
of the days of doing that software and watching the tests and all of that stuff. So no, I'm completely convinced that.
What completely convinces you though?
Huh?
Like, how do you 100%? You worked for these people.
Well, it would have been. It would have been the most massive. I don't.
It is.
I don't believe.
It would have been It is.
No. I don't believe people keep secrets real well in general, and I mean there were literally thousands of people working on that program, right? That if it didn't actually happen, somebody credible would have leaked it. And the millions of dollars that, again, I'm a skeptic on that. The millions and billions of dollars probably that was spent in putting us there. It's too broad a conspiracy to actually.
But all this money that's like gone into it, right? And like, okay, let's say it wasn't, but like, just like some type of quick fix, like the fake, like how they just like performed it at like somewhere, like you
Area
don't think
51.
they just like lost hope and they're just like, okay, well, we're just gonna throw something together.
No,
Okay, so do you,
I'm not.
Again, I was a believer too.
I don't.
And then I started like watching
We
these
haven't been
documentaries. Like, funny thing happened on the way to the moon.
Yeah.
We left a device up there to bounce lasers off of, so you can actually
Like the mirrors.
bounce a laser.
I believe we've
scientific
been there
device.
with
Equipment.
right?
Yeah.
Landers and robots.
Yeah, we haven't put a human up there.
But I don't think a human's been there yet.
Yes, I'm convinced that they have been absolutely.
But see,
convinced.
what that tells me though is that you haven't researched. You actually
You
haven't
just believe.
researched.
No, I
You're going off
haven't.
the same.
No, I haven't. Have I looked into the conspiracy theories and what validity they might have?
No.
No, I haven't.
Right.
Maybe
If you
I skimmed it. I wouldn't.
But here,
no.
here's the interesting thing. I was you, and
Same.
every single person that believes we've been there was you. If you actually were to take the time and research it, you would be Crone Gracie. You would be Eddie Bravo. You would be Bobby Thompson.
Yeah.
If you actually took the time. Let me just share a few things with you. Some people have said, okay, NASA, we've been to the moon 6 times, right? Yeah, 6 times. Can you provide that telemetry data? That's the most critical data you can possibly have. 6 times. You know, NASA said, well, we lost all the telemetry data.
It's old software.
Now you think that that's okay. You think that NASA, Merrill Lynch wouldn't lose this data, you know, Blue Cross Blue Shield, but you're okay with NASA telling us we lost telemetry data for 6 trips to the moon. This is invaluable. We need that to go there again. NASA said, I can just pull up NASA footage right now saying today we can't go to the moon. We're working on the technology. We lost it. They said we had it and we lost it. We're going to try to get it back. They were asked, but do you believe that? Do you believe that NASA lost the telemetry data?
Well, again, I haven't like you said. I mean, I haven't
Right,
researched. But listen, I've worked in IT for 41 years. Okay. On large-scale computing systems. I worked for a bank once that lost all the data for their Visa statements. So can I believe that a government agency over many decades could lose telemetry data, which is reproducible information?
No, it's not.
It's not reproducible for the flights that previously occurred. Yes, I agree with that. But it's data that can be created again on another trip to the moon or another trip up into space. So can I believe that they would lose that? Sure, I could. I mean, they're fucking government agencies. They're inefficient. If a bank can lose Visa statements and can't reproduce them, because that's where we were some years back at a company I worked for, a major bank, the 33rd largest bank in the United States, right? Then yes, I can believe that a government agency could lose telemetry data from 30, 40, 50 years ago.
So if you're okay with that, let's go through a few of the evidences off the top of my mind. So one, you're making excuses for them. You're saying, okay, yeah, the largest government agency.
You know, sure, I think they could, yeah.
All right, so they could lose that. All right,
they could lose that.
So let's go back. Are you familiar with the Van Allen radiation belts?
Yes.
And every scientist that I've seen talk about them says we would need 6. Now, who I consider credible, I listen to people talk. They're college scientists, college professors, and they say it would take 6 feet of lead to protect a human being to pass through the Van Allen radiation belts, which go from either 5 or 10,000 to 25,000 miles. And every astronaut that was asked about them had no idea about them. They were like, the what belts? They're on record asking them about the Van. They're like, how'd you live through the Van Allen radiation belts? You didn't have 6 feet of lead, in your capsule. The capsule had, well, how'd you go through it? It's incredibly toxic to any living being,
Not for the length of time. The issue is the amount of time they were exposed to the radiation. The Van Allen radiation belts aren't toxic to living things in the amount of time that the astronauts have spent passing through them. So what you have to look at is the amount of the amount of radiation that they absorb. I mean, yesterday I was so basically the Van Allen radiation belts aren't deadly. If you remained in them for a period of time, you would experience a fatal dose of radiation. But for the period of time the astronauts flew through them, they wouldn't have been affected by the Van Allen radiation belts.
Some people say different.
In fact, I was talking last night to actually, Adrian, purple belt with Luisa School. So I was having a conversation with him yesterday at the tournament. Turns out he was a Navy construction diver, which, kind of fascinates me. And I had one time years ago, I had met a construction diver, and I thought he worked, on oil rigs and stuff out in the Gulf and stuff. He says, no, I dive in nuclear reactors to repair nuclear reactors, because nuclear reactors are, filled with water.
Right, commercial diver.
And I said to him, well, how do you survive? How do you survive that radiation? I mean, so forget the Van Allen radiation belts. I mean, how can you go into the isolation tank of a nuclear reactor and live to tell about it? He says, well, the water provides insulation. He says it's only deadly within a foot of the reactor. He said, so, and it has to do with the protection and stuff that they wear and the tools they use and things like that, right? But as far as the Van Allen radiation belts go, it's, yes, people, if you stayed in the Van Allen radiation belts for an excessive period of time, the radiation would eventually do harm to your body, but it's not going to kill you. You can pass through the Van Allen.
So you have one belief, and I have another belief. But I want to hear you defend them several.
Sure.
I want to
Go
throw a
ahead.
few
so,
more out there.
So I don't know too much about the topic, but
okay.
go ahead. I'll do my best.
So why do we fake ISS footage? Why do we fake it all? Why is it all fake?
ISS, the
International
space station.
Space Station.
I'm not aware that it is fake.
It is fake. I can show you right now undeniable proof in 10 seconds that all of our ISS footage is fake. There's bubbles all over the place. People actually sit and edit these and just like, oh, here you go. They're supposed to be in space, but then you see the bubbles. And the bubbles always go the same direction. That's a bubble. There's no question about it. All of the footage of them floating out there talking in space, they're all on wires. They show, so they have these the footage where they have the background, which doesn't change, and then they have the foreground, which is the people floating, and then all of a sudden it digitizes, but none of the background digitizes. It's because they're using green screen. So there's absolutely no one, so many video editors would just, one after another, there's not even one that'll go, yeah, that can't happen. That's green screen. It's absolutely green screen. All of our ISS footage is green screen, 100%. All of it.
I've not heard that.
If you were to look at that, and then you'd say, okay, that's undeniably green screen. Why would we do that? Why would we lie to the American? Why would you need to do that, right? Like, why would you lie? Why would you show? Okay, let me ask you another question. Do we have a photograph of the Earth from space or live footage?
A photograph of the Earth from space? Sure, we do.
No, we
Plenty.
don't. No, we don't.
Aren't they just like a bunch of pictures put all together?
There's someone called the Marble Man who works for NASA who creates every image. Every single image is different. Every image we have of the Earth till today is man-made. There is not a photograph of Earth anywhere.
So there's another reason that I don't. There's another reason that I don't. I don't share your. I don't share your skepticism. My niece's husband was the chief scientist with NASA on the Cassini space probe, right? And essentially all the pictures of Saturn and the planets around Saturn, the moons around Saturn that thing orbited, he was responsible essentially for all the photography coming off the Cassini space probe.
Yeah, but
he's a very credible. He's a very credible person to me. So if we can take pictures,
that has no bearing.
But if we can take pictures of, the rings of Saturn and the moons of Saturn up close, and the clouds of Saturn as the things crashing into the planet, I would certainly believe we could have photographs of the Earth from space.
We should. That's exactly what you're saying is so correct. But if you were to look into it, if you just took an hour out of your day or a half an hour, you would find out that we don't have a photograph of Earth from space. We don't.
Why would we
that's
not?
a fact.
But why would if we could have pictures of everything from Pluto to
such a good question
to Saturn and everything in between? Why would we not have a picture of the Earth?
It's such a good question. That is such a good question.
But no one knows the answer to it. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, even NASA admits. Even I can point it out to you on NASA even admits. Well, we don't have a photograph of Earth.
And why not?
That's a good question, isn't it?
Okay, no one knows.
So good.
Isn't there like
I'm
a
intrigued,
picture?
but not convinced.
They could. And here's well, that right there is a fact. That's undeniable. I've seen multiple NASA people say, they've interviewed the guy who creates the pictures. They've interviewed him, and they said, why do you have to create pictures? And he says, well, we only have photographs from satellites, and they can only get so much area, so I have to stitch them together.
So they stitch them together. Oh, okay.
And we have to create, but he makes it a globe. In other words, we don't have any photograph of Earth. We don't have it. It doesn't exist. And we don't have video. Like flat earthers have said, in this movement, they've come out and said, why don't we just turn around the Hubble telescope just for a little bit and have some live footage, and then everyone will shut the hell up. Why don't we just do that? But that hasn't been done. Satellites aren't high enough to show you a globular Earth. There is no photo from space. There's not one from the moon. The reason there's not one from the moon is because we didn't go to the moon. I don't know if you know this. Like if you were to research it, Stanley Kubrick admitted to faking the moon landings. He admitted it. Watch an interesting documentary is Room 237. Stanley Kubrick did The Shining as an admission for faking the moon landings. And
what was the relationship between the two?
Kubrick
is my favorite director, by the way.
Okay.
We just watched Full Metal Jacket.
Then you got to watch Room 237. If Kubrick became my favorite director. Kubrick is all about exposing the lies. What I had no idea, Kubrick's IQ is 165.
Yeah,
He
Kubrick
is
was a genius.
well into
Yeah,
genius.
Yeah, Kubrick was a genius.
All of his movies have what he did. To the layman, they just look at really good movies. They just look like really, really good movies. That's what they look like to the layman. To the person, what he did was put another narrative at a higher level
Yeah,
for,
they were
for
all
genius people.
They were allegorical. Yeah, they were all every one of his movies
Yes.
was allegorical.
So I'm assuming that word means what I think it means. So if you were to watch documentary, there's people have picked apart his movies, and one of them, like there's a documentary out there called Room 237. 237 wasn't an arbitrary room number that was used in The Shining. It's 237,000 miles our distance from the moon to Earth, arguably. And then I don't know if you know, there's a point where he's walking down the hallway and the kid's got an Apollo 11 shirt on, and then there's 50. You'd have to go in. I can't remember them all off the top of my head. It's been a while since I've seen it. But video, there's so many things he put in there. When the guy's sitting on the chair, he's sitting on a throne that has the Rothschilds, the double-headed eagle, the typewriter he used had a meeting, the Tang in the background, and every little thing that he put in there had a relationship, had a clues, right? But there's also there's also video footage on YouTube that it claims to be Stanley Kubrick just admitting on his deathbed, I faked the moon landing.
Shook.
Yeah, so there's some really, I'd look into it. If I were, my only recommendation, see, here's the thing. My mother begged me to look into it. She just begged me for like 3 years. And I wouldn't, because I said, I'm not even gonna entertain that, right? Like, and that right there was a really, I realized that that's not open-minded. That's actually, that right there is that closed-mindedness right there.
Yeah.
If you were to look into it, what you would find out is that I'm telling you, you would be 100%, if you looked into it, I can absolutely assure you, if we met again and you actually watched a few videos, you would be convinced of this. You'd be convinced that our ISS footage is faked. You'd be convinced that we didn't go to the moon on any of those 6 trips. There's 2 documentaries you could watch. First off, they found the footage where the original moon landing, the footage we used and broadcast to Earth, they actually found the unedited tape of that. It's Buzz Aldrin and these guys talking, setting up, making what looks like the Earth. And that's a documentary called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, where it shows them faking it. And Buzz they've been confronted about this. There's another documentary called Astronauts Gone Wild.
Right, I know he's been,
Why
confronted.
won't any of these astronauts just take the $5,000 and swear on the Bible? Instead, one of them punched him. He's like, "Fuck you, get the fuck out of my face." Then they stormed off to their cars, and he's like, "Dude, I'm just trying to give you $5,000. Why is it so offensive? All I want you to do is swear on the Bible." He interviewed all these different astronauts. Why wouldn't an astronaut, if
Just
someone
be like,
came to
"Hey,
me and
give
said,
me-"
"Hey, dude, swear you got your black belt under Luiz Palhares. I'll give you $5,000. I'd be like, "Bro, here you go. It's something I did." You know what I'm
There
saying?
you
It's
go.
like, it's brainless. You're going to give me $5,000. Why did they all punch him in the face? And logic has to kick in at some point, right? Logic has to kick in and go,
Yeah, but I think you got to look at it. I mean, again, obviously you're better. You've seen this stuff. I haven't, right? But I mean, I think you got to look at it from the other, the other end of it too, right? Why, what's the motivation for the government, for all of these private corporations to spend billions of dollars, engage all of these people, in this effort, right? And then to fundamentally not succeed. But I'd have to believe that they didn't succeed 6 times.
So here's the thing.
Now if we only did one. If we only did one and claimed, we did one, people are just not that good a liar, right? If we only did one, right, and someone said to me, "Oh, well, we have this evidence that it might have been fake," stuff like that, I would look at that and I would take that seriously. But we over a period of 10 years, was it 8-10 years? I don't remember exactly what the period was. We did it 6 times.
I know.
So we'd have to lie.
Yes.
So I mean, shit.
Did you see the astronauts being interviewed after they?
Should give this anonymous guy from the New York Times, give this 6 months, and everybody in the fucking world will know who this guy is, right? I mean, the idea that we could keep a conspiracy that large, that quiet, for that many years, without notable people coming forward and saying, we clearly faked it, right? I just find it just too hard to believe. I mean, I'm not a big guy on some conspiracies. I'm not a big guy. So I mean, the counter argument would be, having worked in large corporations, having worked for aerospace corporations, and knowing how freaking stingy they are with doing everything, how carefully anything is analyzed, and frankly, how nobody can keep a secret, right? I mean, sure, if you told me, well, we did this once and, we can't repeat it and blah, 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 and then somebody might come around and say, yeah, it's been faked and here's the evidence and stuff, to my mind, that would have some credence. But you wouldn't carry on a lie for decades.
No, I think they do. I think
It's the government.
This is
I
just
just
the
don't-
tip of
I
the
just-
iceberg.
It's just the government.
What
I
you
just
said
don't-
was
It is the government.
what you said was
I just don't-
why would they that is the really big question. For me, it's not a matter of have they lied to us. No, we did not go to the moon. Unquestionably, we didn't go to the moon. Now it starts a whole other problem. Now you're on this quest for why would they lie to us?
Yeah.
Who are they? Which ones are on that side, right? And then you find out that honestly, when you go down the rabbit hole, what you start to learn is that there's a cabal, and you get indoctrinated into it, and you become one of the sellers, you become one of the pushers. And like, if you're asking me my opinion, if you're actually asking why, and you're rewarded with wealth and you're rewarded with fame, and the real question becomes why? Like, what are they hiding, or who are they, and what are they hiding, and what's the it really makes you.
Well, you see, there's too many sources of credible information, right? There's too many sources of credible information. There's investigative reporters, there's newspapers, there's magazines, there's journals, there's scientific journals. And I just do not believe that I just simply do not believe in human nature that people can keep secrets that big for that long and not have essentially credible, independently credible people with nothing to gain from it. Come out and so this is my problem with sort of a number of conspiracies. I mean, shit, the CIA can't keep its hacking software safe.
So here's the problem,
right? The CIA can't keep its hacking software safe. So faking going to the moon, and multiple times.
No, let me ask you something.
That's where it breaks down for me.
You think our government wouldn't lie to us?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
is incapable.
Oh, God, no. The government's lied to us time
Okay,
and
so
time
you're
and time
so
again.
so
It's
you're saying
clearly
very
possible.
possible.
Oh, of
Now,
course, very possible.
Okay, give me this. If you only had, what's your number one evidence that you can prove? What's your number one evidence other than being told? What's your number one evidence that we've been to the moon?
Well, I mean, I worked for the company that put men there. And
that is nothing to do. You can be a.
That's true. No, that's true. I was one small cog, in a wheel, in a giant wheel. I saw the equipment. I spoke to the people who built it. I knew the engineers who built it. I mean, just in that little microcosm.
So you have no proof, is what you're saying. You have no belief.
At the level you're asking, I have no proof in that other than what I experienced.
No, you're just saying you
myself.
just have a belief. You've been indoctrinated, basically, is what you're saying.
Well, I don't think anybody twisted my arm. I just happened to randomly come across these
but
people. In the course
if you're being
of my
asked
work.
for a single proof, but you're saying what? This is the amazing part to me. Is that it's so convincing, and I'm.
Well, again, we'll have to agree to disagree. You've seen this evidence, I have not, because I do have a fundamental belief that we have been there. We have been there multiple times. We'll go back again. You've got people investing eventually in going to Mars. We've sent probes to all of the outer planets. We're going to send a lander to.
But what you're saying has no relation. Like those. First off,
no.
If you're talking about going to the moon or not, let's just say, I don't think people are saying we can't send electronics out into space.
Okay,
I don't think anyone's saying that. So I don't think that has
but
a relation.
If we have the technology, to do that, right? If we have the technology to do that, I've been in technology my entire life. We have the technology to put a human there if they're willing to take the risks. We know the conditions in space. We know how to mitigate those conditions. And, we have people brave enough to make the trip. I mean,
But
this
if-
whole
but if
Mars
you-
thing, look at this Mars thing. I think is Elon Musk involved in that one?
absolutely.
He's
But
the one.
there's a couple of guys. I think Branson and Musk are involved in trying to put somebody on Mars, right? Which they might succeed in doing in the next 20 years, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we have the technology to survive in those environments, and we have people brave enough and/or foolish enough to make the attempt.
Yeah, but
So
what
at the
you're-
end of the day, do I believe that 1960s technology could have put us on the moon? Yes, because
So what if let me just talk about this. Right now we don't have anyone on Mars. Right now we don't have
That's
anyone on the
true.
move. You
That's
have no
correct.
just because we talk about these things or we've sent something, a probe into space
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with the art. Like, so what you're doing is you're using arguments that are they're not related to the argument.
But what you're using is you're using one set of arguments from one group of people, and my point to you is that there's a much broader group of people who would have a great deal to gain monetarily by exposing this, and they choose not to. And that population
yeah,
of
but-
people,
but to
the
you-
Washington Post, the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, the Florida Times Union, and that's just newspapers.
I find
there's just an enormous group
Yeah.
of people out there, much larger than the group of people who claim that there's a conspiracy here, that would credibly be able to make a profitable case for the line they're on, if money is the motivator.
Here's
for
the
all this.
irony is I'm educated
Okay.
on the counterparts
Okay.
and you're not.
That's true.
You're completely uneducated in the
That's
counterparts.
absolutely
You're-
correct.
You have 100%
No,
of your
I-
argument
I-
is based on government indoctrination. 100%. Yeah,
yes.
100%. 100% of it is. 100% of
No, I
because
wouldn't say it was.
I was
no,
you.
I
was you
wouldn't say
here.
it was government. I wouldn't say it was government indoctrination.
It is because it's
not
high
government
school,
indoctrination.
elementary school, middle school,
No,
college.
it's not.
It is.
It's not. It's not that at all. It's looking at the way the world works. It's looking at the way the world works, and the number of people who would profit tremendously by exposing this with irrefutable fact.
But do you know the people that are profiting from running NASA and selling the fact that we're spending billions on stuff going into space and it's not actually happening?
Yeah, I'm making yes.
the argument works
I've
both
already
ways.
I've already admitted yes. The argument works both ways. I'm already admitting to you I don't have the information, right? So I'm using the only argument that I can actually use, and that's look at the population sizes. Look at the population sizes of the people who claim that we haven't been there, and the people who could, irrespective of how much they're being paid.
That's irrelevant. That has nothing to do with.
Well, it's the only argument I got. So I mean.
So your argument, your best argument
at
for
the
the
end,
Earth is
yeah.
round is the population size.
No.
More people believe
no,
the Earth
we're not
is
talking
round.
about the Earth is round. We're talking about the moon landing. The Earth is
or
round.
the moon landing, both. I'll say them either way.
The physics
here's
tells
the
us,
thing.
I think the physics of the universe tells us that the Earth is round.
the-
I mean, now we're talking about a population of physicists and cosmologists
But hold on.
who understand.
Hold on. No one said we didn't live on a globe. No one said that. I never said that.
Okay, that's what I assumed you meant when you said flat Earth.
No. The dimensions of the Earth could be different, which could make the surface area that we're living on relatively flat. That's just one possibility.
Okay,
Just
all right.
one.
Okay, all right.
Just one.
All right. You weren't clear on that.
There's others. I think that's a big problem that people
Uh-huh.
have. But number one is you can't throw out, and we'll switch gears here within the next 3 minutes, within the next 2 minutes. But number one is you can't bring up one piece of evidence that would prove, because I'd disprove it instantly, no matter what you know. So if your evidence were, well, we have pictures of Earth, we don't.
No.
So you think we do? We don't have footage of Earth. We don't. We don't have footage of Earth, and we don't have pictures of Earth. And even if you were to look, I'll tell you one problem you're going to see immediately, is if you go to look at a picture of Earth. First off, if you were to look at if you actually did the research, you'd see where NASA even admits that yes, we do create all those, and all the ones that you see have a perfectly black background, black. Not that someone went out there and cut it out, but there's just mysteriously no stars and mysteriously no satellites, even though our Earth is supposed to be covered in them. It's just mysteriously not there. And another thing is the one shot we have of the Earth from the moon, holy crap. When you see the graphics artist that went in and changed all the different, you see where they pasted it there. You can see the square cutout where they pasted it there. And it's undeniable. Because they walk you through the steps that you can do it yourself. You can take the original footage and they walk you through how to do the contrasting and whatnot, and you can see that it's a pasted graphic. But there's so much more proof. And if you really were to get into it, I would just say research it, because you're going to find out that every single piece of proof that you believe in is a lie. I believe that. So we'll switch gears.
I feel like do your research. My dad was kind of like hard-headed, didn't really want to believe, but the more he started hanging out with this guy, the more documentaries and videos and just more research he's done, and like in the past few weeks, probably even month, he's more open-minded to ideas.
But I also do research to debunk a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he does. He does.
That he brings up.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to go against what what he tells me, but I do try to do my own research.
Here's my biggest problem is I know no one has debunked, and you can look for these. We don't have video footage of Earth, and we don't have a photo of Earth. We don't. And you may believe that, but we don't. And I don't know if you know.
No, I mean, I think the satellite argument that you made is probably a good one. They're probably.
But here's the thing: is we've sent satellites into space that could have taken a photo, and we have satellites in space that can. For example, the Hubble.
I'll have to ask my nephew.
They could. Flat Earthers are like, why don't you just turn around the Hubble and prove us? Why don't you just show us that?
Yeah.
Why can't you? And they won't.
I think with Space Force, we're gonna get some of those answers. Those questions answered. Once we get
we got to
Space
fight
Force
some bugs first. Assuming we defeat the bugs.
The Space Force.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of excited about it.
You're excited about the Space Force?
If I was young enough, if I was her age, I'd be.
Yeah, but you know what could be going on there? And I mean, I hate to say it, is when you go down these conspiracy paths and you start to entertain possibilities, and you start to say, well, if this is a real possibility, you start to see other possibilities that are very, very real. If NASA is just a mechanism to take money from American people, billions and billions of dollars, to funnel that all under the guise that we're doing space travel that we're not, right? Then imagine what the Space Force would be. It would be another way to take money from the American people. Oh, we're going to have a $1 trillion budget, and here we don't really have a Space Force. You know, we're not really in space.
$1 trillion laser program.
$1 trillion laser program.
Yeah. So.
And then it goes in the pockets of all those the cabal.
But it's good. At any rate, I love you, brother. I love everyone.
Same here.
And I do. I enjoy a good argument, and if I ever get up.
Same here. I mean, I don't have a lot of data to the contrary. All the data I have. And my personal experience has indicated, yes, we've been to the moon.
But for the record,
yeah,
everyone I know wouldn't even entertain it, and I wouldn't. Like, it took me 3 years, and I only did it to. My mom just said, "Do it to debunk me." You know, just do it. So everything I started doing, I'll throw one more thing out there is. Well, that's on a different topic.
Okay.
Maybe we'll come back to it. So
before you leave Antarctica, I wanted to tell you a quick story, an interesting story.
Yeah.
So I have one strange connection to Antarctica. I worked with a guy who is one of only 2 people to survive a plane crash on the continent of Antarctica. Wow. So when I worked for a company called NatWest in New York, I worked with a guy named Al Stetz. And Al he was a former military guy. He was very, buttoned down, very laced up, kind of guy. Nice guy. And I was having lunch with him one day, and I noticed the skin on his hand, seemed to be burnt. Mm-hmm. And I knew he was in the military, So I said, maybe, something. And back in when was this? This would have been in the late 1970s, early 1980s. So it was, fresh Vietnam veterans, were around in a plentiful, fashion. So I thought, gee, maybe he was injured, in Vietnam, right? I knew he was in the Air Force. And he says to me, he says, you're talking to one of only 2 people, he says, to survive a plane crash on the continent of Antarctica. I said, really? So you got to tell me about that. He goes, he goes, when I was in the service, he says, we were flying supply missions down to McMurdo Station on Antarctica from Inverness, New Zealand, right? He says, and it was a long trip. He says, and the plane had skis on it. He says, and we were flying a 2-prop, 4-prop plane. And he says, a long distance to McMurdo from there. He says, we didn't have enough fuel in the normal tanks of the plane, so we had to carry a fuel bladder at the back of the plane for extra fuel to get the plane down there to resupply McMurdo. so he says, so it was a normal mission. He said he had done it many times. He says he flies, they flew down, they landed on the ice. The plane had skis. They landed on the ice, at McMurdo. And the area that they had was about actually 20 miles from the base, right? So the snowcats would come out and wait for the plane, and then they would unload the plane, and the snowcats would take the stuff, back to the base. He goes, so it was a routine mission for us. He says we turned the plane around. He says, and we're heading down the runway. He says, and the plane's bouncing. He says, I lift the plane off. He says, and the next thing I know, the fuel bladder in the back of the plane ruptured. He says, and the entire back of the plane is engulfed in flames. Whoa. Right? He said, so I turn the plane around. He says, and I make a crash landing, basically back, on the airstrip. Now at this point, the snowcats and everything had left. He said, so the plane crashes. He says, I'm temporarily on college. He says, a number of my guys in the back are dead. He says, my navigator's dead. He says, my co-pilot's unconscious. I'm unconscious. He says, I wake up. He says, and I realize, kind of what's happened now, He says, and I actually pull my co-pilot, out of the plane. He says, and now you've got an interesting, now you've got a really interesting decision to make. He says, do you stay next to the burning plane, and die in the explosion that might occur? He says, or do you leave the plane and freeze to death on the continent of Antarctica until the snowcats come back? And they both got rescued because the snowcats, which still hadn't gotten back to McMurdo at the time, according to the story he told me, had seen the plane, had seen the trail of flames, and they turned around and they came back and they got rescued. But can you imagine that?
No.
Yeah, that's pretty.
And
That's
that's
pretty
how
intense.
that's how his
That'd be an
hand
intense-
that was how his hand got scarred up when he reached in the plane to pull his co-pilot out.
That's a hell of a story.
That's pretty hell of it. Not something I expected to hear over a casual lunch one day with a friendly guy I worked with. Anyway, so
You said he was Air Force?
he was a colonel in the Air Force. Yeah.
Interesting.
So
Great story.
so I think we were on travel, right?
Yeah, we talked about travel.
Antarctica
We
came up,
went to
so-
the moon.
Yeah. Let's go back.
Jesus.
Went all the way to
And,
the moon.
Where did you say you hadn't been? You said there's somewhere you hadn't been.
Antarctica.
That was
I've
it.
not been to Antarctica.
So you've been to every other continent.
I've been to every other continent. Yeah.
Favorite? What's your favorite?
Oh my God, there's so many. Tahiti is the most beautiful place in the world. I've been to no place more beautiful than Tahiti. I've been there twice. If you ever get a chance to go, don't miss it. I was there in the late '80s, and I was there in the early 2000s, and it is absolutely the most beautiful place on the planet. Now, when I was there in the '80s, Tahiti itself is nothing to see. You have to go out to Moorea, Bora Bora, and in the '80s, that's what I did. The plane landed on a motu, which is a coral reef that's grown up above the surface of the water, and they've turned it into an airstrip. And then you take a small boat from the motu on Bora Bora over to, via Pete Harbor. And Bora Bora, at the time I was there, only had 3 hotels on it, only 2 of which a Westerner would stay in, and 1 was for the locals. And of course, now it's overrun with hotels, but it's still a very beautiful place. The second time I went, first time I went by air, and we saw Tahiti, Moorea, and Bora Bora. But the second time I went, we did it by cruise ship, which was a much, much better way of going, because we went to a number of the out islands, to Taha'a, Raiatea, and Huahine, which are still, at least in the early 2000s, was still like what one would romantically imagine Polynesia to be. It was very, very beautiful. I mean, the air is scented with hibiscus. I mean, literally, the air is perfumed. It is so beautiful. It's incredible. So that was one great place. Of course, then I was to the base of Mount Everest in Nepal in 1993. That's a trip everybody should make once, and you only want to do it once. And that was a pretty amazing, amazing trip. That was the third poor. Nepal was the third poorest country in the world at the time I was there. Mm-hmm. And it's a 3-week excursion. And we lived in the mountains, for 3 weeks. We were up at 18,000 feet. The foothills are 18,000 feet. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And so I had to deal with the high altitude. A lot of interesting stories from that. A lot of interesting stories. I have videotape of an avalanche on the other mountain that we were walking down the Kosi River Valley. Walked from a village called Namche Bazaar, which is a famous village, to a place called Shangbo-She, which if you look at my Facebook page, the mountain range behind the main background picture, not the one of my wife and myself, but the main background picture, that's Mount Everest behind us. And if you look close on the ridge, you'll notice a building, and that was the monastery at Shangbo-She. It's on a ridge between Pomo Ri and Amadablam, and it's at 12,500 feet. And, up to the Shangbo-She monastery, Tangbo-She, not Shangbo-She, Tangbo-She. Up to the Tangbo-She monastery, this low scrub brush, it's kind of alpine, right? Once you get beyond Tangbo-She, it's like ice and rock. It's like, and the top of the world is still close to 3 miles higher than where you stand. It's amazing. It was an amazing journey. That were a lot of stories from that trip. But that was probably had the biggest personal impact on me, because you were living for 3 weeks with literally the third people from the third poorest country in the world, and these people
No internet.
I met they didn't know what a computer was.
Right.
They didn't know what a computer. We were in you fly into an airstrip called Lukla, and Lukla has facilities, right? So to speak. It had a hotel which was like a rustic ski lodge that we stayed in, and on the way there we met our team, because we hiked in. You have to hike in and out, and they carry all the equipment on what they call zupkis, which are cross between a yak and an ox, right? So we had a yak train carrying our shit, and Sherpas. The Sherpa people up there literally carrying these loads up and down these mountains. I'm walking around with a 5-pound backpack, and I'm thinking I'm going to die, right? Just from the altitude, and the Sherpa kid, as we were meeting everybody, and they were getting friendly with everybody we're going to be with for 3 weeks. The kid asked me what I did, and I said I worked with computers. And he didn't know what a computer was. This was in 1993, and he was kind of confused. And I said, like a calculator, like a calculating machine? Oh, okay. Then he knew what it was. Then he must have thought I was some sort of an accountant or something. Right. And but that was an amazing trip. That was a really, really amazing trip. And so then, what else? I've been to the base of Angel Falls in the Venezuelan jungle. So Angel Falls is the tallest straight down waterfall in the world. It's 0.6 of a mile, and we flew from Miami to Caracas. We spent the night in Caracas. Got woken up in the middle of the night to gunfire. That was kind of fun. Then got on a plane to a city in eastern Venezuela called Ciudad Bolivar, and in Ciudad Bolivar we got in 2 small single-engine planes and flew 300 miles into the jungle to a dirt airstrip in an Indian village called Camarata. Now, we weren't up in the air 5 minutes when all you could see in any direction was a sea of green, triple canopy jungle, no lights, no cities, no people, no nothing, for several hours till we got to Camarata. And then we land in Camarata, huts, dirt airstrip. We met our native guides there, Pomone Indians. So our guide spoke English, Spanish, and Pomone. And we got in a small boat 100 miles upriver from Angel Falls, and we navigated across the Corral and the Caroni rivers 100 miles to the base of Angel Falls. Slept in the jungle. There's no trails in the jungle. There's nothing. The river system in the jungle is the highway system. And what the native Indians have done in the area is they set up these lean-tos, which are these buildings with grass roofs and stilts, and you string your hammocks up between the stilts at night, and that's where you sleep. And so we were in an open boat, 8 Americans, 6 Pomone Indians, and our guide from Caracas. The guy from Caracas, his name was Juan Carlos. He was the most amazing person I ever met. Dropping this guy in the middle of the Venezuelan jungle was created about as much problem for him as dropping me in the middle of Times Square with an American Express card, right? I mean, this guy was incredible. You know, we'd be motoring along, and he'd tell the Indians, like, pull over here. Like, he'd pull over to a tree, and he'd pull this fruit out of a tree, and he'd go, here, taste this. Yeah, this is edible. And you know, just the guy, literally, you could have just dropped him in the jungle and said sayonara, and, you know, a couple months later, he'd have walked out someplace. I mean, it's just, this presented absolutely no problem to him at all. He was an amazing guy.
Right.
So that was a great trip. And then, what was the other one? I've been to Africa twice. Go before it's gone. That was absolutely, so Victoria Falls. I've seen most of the great water, I believe I've seen all of the great waterfalls of the world. I've seen Gullfoss Falls in Iceland, Victoria Falls in Zambia, Angel Falls in Venezuelan jungle. What else? Iguazu in South America. Iguazu in South America is, of all the waterfalls in the world, Iguazu is the most amazing. It's on the Brazilian-Argentine border. That's a beautiful place. So yeah, I've been around the block.
Nice.
A few times.
I love travel, man. That's I'm envious. I haven't done South America yet. I've been just about everywhere else, but
Yeah.
I just haven't had the interest yet to go. It's purely been about interest for me.
Well, what sparked the interest for me was, I was always, I double majored in college in computer science and anthropology, two diametrically opposed subjects, and so the computer science paid for all the trips to all the places I learned about in anthropology class.
There you go. Yeah.
But I've been to every country in Central America with the exception of El Salvador. I've not been to Colombia, any of the Guianas, Bolivia, Peru, or Ecuador, but I've been to Brazil, Chile, Argentina, Venezuela. I've been to Canada, of course, Iceland, most of Europe. I've not been to Belgium. Been to Turkey, Australia, New Zealand, the Cook Islands in the South Pacific, Tahiti, Hawaii, China. Not been to Russia, not been to Scandinavia. There's places I haven't seen Machu Picchu. I want to do that.
Yeah.
I haven't been to Russia, and I haven't been to any
Now,
of the
what's the
Scandinavian
fascination with
countries.
Machu Picchu? Why do you want to see that one in particular?
Well, it's just again, just kind of rounds out, like I've been to, for example, I've been to India. I've seen the Taj Mahal. I've seen kind of all of the great sites of the world, with the exception of what people generally believe to be the great sites of the world. Anyway.
Have you been to Egypt and the Sphinx?
No,
and the
Egypt.
pyramids?
Egypt is the other place. Egypt is on the list. The problem with Egypt is I don't want to go to any place like where they're shooting tourists. So Egypt's got to kind of quiet down a little bit,
Sure.
and then I'll go to Egypt to see the pyramid. What I have left to do in Africa is Morocco and Egypt. In my opinion, there's three reasons to go to Africa, right? Culture, animals, or sites. So I've done animals and sites, but I've not done culture. So Egypt to me, Egypt and Morocco are a culture trip.
Hunting animals?
No. So, pictures,
Safari.
pictures. That was an incredible experience too. Oh man, you wouldn't believe how close you get to the animals and some of the experiences we had. I mean, just one, brief story. They take you out to bush camps, which are these self-sustaining camps in the middle of the wherever, the jungle, the Serengeti, the plain, what have you. And so you have dinner in a general area, right? And then they told us that, well, at night, when you go back to your hut, you have to be escorted back with an armed guard for fear the animals will pick you off on the way back to the hut. So that was pretty cool. So they use Maasai. In Tanzania, I was in Tanzania, they use Maasai.
That's a tribe, right? Native tribe?
That's a native tribe.
Right.
And these Maasai, they carry spears, right? And so I hung around after dinner a little bit, chatting it up with some people, and it got late, and I said, okay, I want to go back. So they said, okay, we'll send a couple guys with you. So they had a Maasai guy behind me with a spear, and they had a Maasai guy in front of me with a flashlight and a spear, right? So we're walking about, I'm going to say, 1,500 feet, from this area to where my particular hut was, right? And it's, no moon, moonless night, dead quiet. We're walking along. All of a sudden, the guy in front of me stops. And I heard nothing, saw nothing, right? He turns the flashlight to the left, and there's this huge, some kind of a African antelope with this incredible set of horns sitting in the bush about just 10 feet off the path we were on. And I'm thinking to myself, holy crap. I'd have walked right past that thing and never even knew it was there. But these guys are so sensitive to the environment, that he was able to pick it up.
I want to show you a video real quick.
Sure.
That might get you thinking. Come around, guys. Come around.
Oh God.
We'll switch it to the front.
We're back on the moon thing again.
Well, I just kind of wanted to show you something. So you said, in those 8 years, we went to the moon several times. And let me show you some of the footage that we got provided from NASA. Okay, so this is NASA footage of us going to the moon, all right? This is clearly stop motion. Clearly stop motion. Now watch. Now hold on. Did he just turn his helmet?
What did he do?
Did he? Oh, you didn't see
No, I
that?
missed it.
This is supposed to be real NASA. Now watch his helmet. Watch his helmet. But that's real. We really went there, and that's real.
Wait, this is supposed to be real?
It's supposed to be real.
This
This is
looks
the
like a
real
cartoon.
footage. It is. That's stop motion.
This
And he
looks like a
turned.
cartoon.
But that's okay because people think this is real. People think that this was the footage we got, and it was real, right?
Some low quality footage.
Yeah. But 19, in that
Okay.
time, it was.
How does a helmet turn?
This is what-
No,
It-
the helmet shouldn't turn.
Yeah,
The
it
helmet
shouldn't.
be fixed.
But if you were to go back and research past footage, you'll find these problems with all of
Dun,
ours,
dun,
with
dun,
all of it.
drama.
It's all.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's all faked, right? But we don't go back and look. That's the problem. We just take it for granted. It's just put in the history books, and they go, yeah, we did it. But then you go back and you look, and you're like, that's some fake shit, bro. That's stop motion. You can't turn a helmet,
No, you can't
right?
turn it out.
But you listen to the astronaut's argument, right? Then you'll interview an astronaut, and they'll have some kind of
Explanation for it?
which is clearly bullshit, right? But if you were to go back and look, you'd find these inconsistencies with all of the moon landings, right? Or all of our exploits in space, right? It's all the same thing. That's just one, right? That's just one. So my point is, just by showing you that, there are guys that have put together 200 proofs, compilations of just one after another, and you're like, holy shit, why didn't I, the thing of it is if you go back, it's so easy to bust the technology now, and people have done it.
Mm-hmm.
They've contrasted the videos, and you can see where the video editing exists now, and you can say that was all faked. The problem is no one does it because we have other people corroborating it. Modern, you have Neil deGrasse Tyson, you have all these people out there, but the argument is a very common sense, and I hate to switch gears again, but I'm gonna. It's a very common sense argument because you go, well, we know we live in a heliocentric, model, and we know we're hurling through space, and we know there's a universe, and all this makes perfect sense, and I don't doubt any of that. It's very probable, and even if we were, even if other planets are globular, that doesn't change the fact that we could still live in a relatively flat space, or just the fact that there is another planet and we've sent something by it or crashed into it and taken photos. That doesn't mean we set someone on the moon. If you go back and look at those things, you're going to find major inconsistencies, major inconsistencies.
See, I'm not so much interested in, the things that interest me in general about space is the cosmology. It's not necessarily the conspiracy theories or anything of that nature. I think the realities of what we know are stranger than the conspiracy theories that may or may not be made up.
But I would,
right? So when just the things I like to get into are the arguments about the nature of reality and what the physics is telling us or not telling us about the nature of reality. And I find those things to be sort of far more interesting than the conspiracy theories and stuff of that nature.
So let's.
Do you want to hop on that
Let's
for a little bit?
segue into that real quickly.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a good segue and I've asked other people, I like to kind of ask that. What are your beliefs on religion and or spirituality?
I'm an atheist, well, maybe I'm I'm an atheist or I'm an agnostic. I mean, show me the evidence and I'll believe, right? As Bill Maher likes to say, if Jesus comes down from space and, lands on the White House lawn and does some miracle and goes, I'm Jesus, I'll be on the first one online going, forgive me. But up until then, I'm an atheist, right? Now, what I find interesting, what I find more interesting is what the quantum mechanics tell us about what the nature of reality might be, and that leaves a possibility of some form of a higher power, but not evidence thereof, right? So there's a lot of arguments, so one of the common arguments about creationism versus evolution is a thing called the Planck constant. Right? Are you familiar with this? Mm-hmm. So the Planck constant is a number. It measures.
That's Max Planck, right?
Yeah, it's one of the famous physicists. That, right? Yeah, it measures some of the electro. And again, I'm no expert. I'm a rank amateur at this, but I've done a fair amount of reading for lay people on it. Right. So I mean, the Planck constant measures certain electromagnetic forces in atoms, electrons, or some subatomic particles. Right. It's a number this is a really tiny number that goes down to like minus 32, like the power of like minus 32. It's an incredibly tiny number. If that people argue that, people know that if that number, physicists know that if that number was off by just a little bit, an incredibly tiny amount, the entire universe as we know it simply cannot exist. So they point to that and say, well, that's all the chance that could be a random accident seems improbable compared to the fact that might be a design criteria. So they argue for design, they argue for, creationism versus evolution, right? So I think that's interesting, right? My personal belief, because I also believe in the current multiverse theory of cosmology, that we perhaps do live in one of an innumerable number of universes, and when you talk to when you look at things like the wave particle duality of matter and things of that nature, that tends, I think, to give credence to the multiverse type of theory that was espoused by like a number of people. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that's the kind of stuff that intrigues me. I mean, are you familiar with like Schrodinger's cat?
Yeah, if it fell to its death or something, and it's in a, is it alive or is it dead?
The thing that
is it dead until you open the bag?
It's dead till you open. It's you don't know whether it's alive or dead until you open the box.
Right.
And this has to do with something called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which indicates that the position or motion of an electron can't be known simultaneously, which fundamentally means that what that fundamentally means is that the act of observation affects the measurement. If the act of observation,
which we see with the dual slit experiment,
right. If the act of observation affects the measurement, what does that say about what role our consciousness plays in creating the universe in which we? Now there's a new set of very credible people from Oxford University and others who now are. Think that the search for a grand unification theorem in physics is wrong-headed, and that what we ought to look at is something called biocentrism, where that we can't really define the universe absent our consciousness, right? And one of the things that Einstein's equation teaches us is time is a dimension just like length, width, and depth. Yet we only experience time in the moment. We don't experience time as a continuum. Yet what Einstein's equations would tell us is that time is a dimension, just like distance and height and everything else. So why can't we see back into the past or forward into the future? We might be limited by the neural geometry of our minds, to create the illusion of the passage of time, right? Which I think has obviously remarkable implications for what life and death is, whether or not there is an afterlife. Et cetera. So I think questions like that are to me far more fascinating than sort of religion or conspiracy theories, or anything else of that nature. And from all my anthropology training, I mean, the function that religions have provided. Religion was a form of social organization in the days before laws, right? So that was the function of religion in primitive societies. It prevented a level. It in the absence of the state or absence of law, it provided a method of social organization. And I also think religions around the world, provide essentially a moral background against which to measure ourselves by at least man's definition of morality, right? So I believe religion has a function, right? But the notion of a supreme being eludes me till I see the evidence. Now, the other interesting question that's come up, I could talk a lot about this, right? But the other interesting question that's come up, fairly recently, with the study of black holes is, do we live in a simulation?
That's one that I'd like to
Do we live
think about.
Do we live in a simulation? So
Elon Musk says 99%, more than 99%. I think it was like 99 million %, or to 0.00001.
Well. So let's just take a little bit of crazy reasoning again, for which I have no evidence, but it does logically follow, right? And I am a computer expert, so we're going to kind of bring everything together. So so there's a physicist at Oxford named Bostrom who's written on he believes he sees bits out in the universe. He believes as he looks out he sees information, right? And this whole question arose around what happens in a black hole, right? The laws of physics basically tell us that matter can't be created or destroyed, just change. Yet if matter falls into a black hole, it disappears, right? Well, no, it doesn't. What happens is the event horizon of the black hole expands, and what they believe it's expanding with is a representation of the information of what fell in and was destroyed by the black hole. Right? Anyway, this leads people much smarter than I, and for those reasons and others, to believe that we might be actually a simulation, right? The entire universe could essentially be a simulation. And so I find that, I don't necessarily believe that, but I find that interesting, and I'd like to learn more about that. Now let's just take an example, right? We're probably on the verge of creating a quantum computer. Well, you probably know what a quantum computer is.
Yeah, we arguably have them.
Arguably, right? They're not very powerful at this point. You can't run too many qubits simultaneously, but they apparently exist at some level for certain problems, right? So a quantum computer basically does computations in zero time. If you can make a big enough quantum computer, you can do computations in zero time. If you can do computations in zero time, you can simulate in theory, you can simulate the most complex problems on Earth. So let's say that there's an advanced civilization that's 100,000 years, 1 million years, 10 million years, 1 billion years more advanced than we are, right? There's another line of thought among evolutionists to believe that the next stage of evolution for human beings isn't a better form of man, it's machine, right?
Transhumanism, right?
Right. So if our evolutionary fate, if some civilization that existed long before us reached the state of quantum computation,
right.
Perhaps they had an interest in creating a simulation, and perhaps that simulation is our entire universe.
Well, even without quantum computing, and that's the reasoning that Elon Musk gives. Like that line of thought that you're going is his reasoning. Is that what are the odds that we just happen to be at the milestone that we're at? It's like as big as the universe, as long as time is, more than likely. It's already happened, and we're just running in a simulation.
Yeah.
Right?
So I mean, I find that I find that a little bit preposterous, right? Versus other lines of physics thinking, but I don't find that as, for example, as improbable as we didn't go to the moon.
Yeah.
So just so you know where my head is, right? So those kinds of things, I think, because you can't explain them. And there's this new now theory that about the origins of the universe that involves biocentrism, which means basically that you won't find a grand unification theory in physics until you include consciousness. And you were talking the other day about, I overheard you talking the other day about the two computers that learned how to talk to one another, that they had to shut down because it got scary. They created
AI,
their own
yeah.
language.
The
right?
robot.
They were talking.
Yeah, well, I used to teach AI, so I know quite a bit about it, right? And so the two machines began to talk to one another, and they shut it down. That's some scary shit.
Yeah.
But the scarier shit, which maybe you haven't seen, but have you looked on have you looked on the computer for the machines that demonstrated consciousness?
Sentient. You're talking about sentient computers.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
YouTube video
I've seen.
where they have
wait, first of all,
these small little robots, right? And it's an experiment, and where the one robot in a simple manner was essentially self-aware, which that's frightening, right? And so we're kind of still in our technological infancy, really.
well, we have computers today that can pass Turing tests.
Yeah.
We have
Oh,
that,
absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's no.
And we had that in
fact,
2010.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we had that
Arguably sooner.
arguably sooner, right? I mean, do you know about Dreyfus? Do you know who Dreyfus is?
No.
So back in the 60s, at the dawn of AI, right? So there was two schools of artificial intelligence. There was connectionism, which is neural networks, and there was symbolism, which was that our brains are big symbol manipulators more so than connection machines, right? And so the biggest proponent of symbolism was a guy at MIT named Marvin Minsky, because in the mid '60s he proved that perceptrons, which were early neural networks, he proved at the time that the perceptrons couldn't learn. That was disproven in 1983, but at the time, so he was like the biggest proponent of AI. So he used to get into these intellectual arguments with a philosopher at MIT named Dreyfus. And Dreyfus wrote a famous book called What Machines Still Can't Do, right? And I have Dreyfus's book I have Minsky's books and Dreyfus's books and everything on my bookshelf at home. If you pull Dreyfus's book down now and you read what machines can't do, every single thing in the book has been done by a machine. Mm-hmm. And so because he made this very eloquent at the time intellectual argument about a machine would never be able to paint, it would never be able to compose a symphony, it would never be able to read a language, it would never be able to speak, all of which has been, sort of completely, completely blown out of water at this point, right? So, so I actually subscribe somewhat to the theory that, our evolution may not lie in better biology, it may lie in essentially a disembodied intelligence, right? And in some form of a machine, or maybe something that even eventually transcends a machine, but that's something that we can't comprehend at this point. And so I think those kinds of questions are more logical and more interesting, in terms of what mankind. I mean, because what I like to think about is, according to science, which was another place I've been to Oldavi Gorge in Tanzania, where Louis Leakey found Lucy, I think it was, one of the early no longer the earliest human ancestor, but for many, many years. What a godforsaken, holy shit, what a godforsaken place.
I think now
that
they
is.
think the Denisovans are the oldest
Could be,
human ancestors.
I think you're right. But that was, what a godforsaken place. Holy crap. Why anybody would look for anything out there was just amazing to me. We drove for like 2 hours into this freaking scrub desert where there was nothing around for miles, right? And there was this gorge, and down in that gorge was where Louis Leakey, found Lucy. And I was like, why would you even? Who in their right mind would even come out here, right? But anyway, you think about that, right? So if some form of man or hominid is only 3 million years old, right? What would we be like? I mean, think about how different we are today from that hominid. What will we be like biologically in 3 million years?
Yeah.
Nothing like this. And then when you add the technology layer on top of it, we may find ways to download our consciousness into a machine.
Well, that's what Elon Musk was talking about, the neuro thread, or connecting our bodies through to the internet, basically, because the bandwidth. He was talking about bandwidth, and I was trying to understand what he was talking about. But he was talking about a bandwidth, human bandwidth. Like, we're too slow. Our information comes from Google, from our phones that everyone carries around nowadays. And he wants to merge that, so we don't need a phone. Like, that information goes directly
That's
into our
scary.
brain.
Yeah.
So you're almost superhuman.
Yeah. Well, that gets to, like, so that also may answer there's another famous set of discussions called the Fermi paradox. Enrico Fermi, who was one of the atomic bomb creators, right? He asked a famous question about the aliens. Where are they all? Where's all the aliens?
I was just watching a TED talk about this
Yeah,
the other day.
yeah. Where are all the aliens?
Right.
Right?
They're waiting for us to get there.
Well, no. They may have so far. They may be all around us right now, but we might be as interesting to them as worms are to us.
Right. They're, yeah.
If the universe is best estimates are the universe is 13.6 billion years old. Man, if you want to count 3 million years, is 3 million years old. If you want to count living in organized societies, we're somewhere between 5 and 10,000 years old. We're a speck in time, literally a speck in that time, right? Now, the universe is vast, and as far as we know, the speed of light, well, we're not even sure about that, but in general, the speed of light is the most immutable force in the universe, right, in terms of how far you can travel, right? But entire societies entire planetary societies could have come and gone many, many times over in different parts of the universe in that 13.6 billion years.
Absolutely.
And if one of them survived their technological infancy and didn't blow themselves up with some form of atomic weapon or exterminate themselves in some other way, and survived past that technological infancy, we might be, frankly, as interesting to them as worms are to us.
Yeah, and I think another part of that was the possibility that they evolved beyond
Physical bodies.
Yeah, well, they evolved beyond society the way they kind of evolved kind of back into what they were once, like Indians, so to speak, where they're not trying to go out. They've answered their questions.
Yeah,
and
they've answered.
evolved
Maybe that's
internally
possible.
again.
Yeah,
They basically start.
There's 13 or 15, I think, different responses to the Fermi's question about where's all the aliens.
Yeah.
And that's another one that perhaps they've satisfied themselves and have come back in. Another is that where is interesting, to war as worms are them. The thing that fascinates me, why I'm not like sort of too into conspiracy theories. The U.S. Air Force recently released videotape of two of their fighter jets chasing something around that they just don't understand what the fuck it is.
Yeah.
Right? Now that to me should blows my mind.
But that should lead you down a conspiracy road, and
Well, if you apply Occam's razor, which is what science says is the simplest explanation is always the best, then you would have to assume that thing is man-made. But shit, a lot of, if you will, government people who would have arguably a reason to hide that stuff, kind of put it out on the internet and said, we don't know what the fuck this is.
most people believe that the only way we could have grown as fast as we have in a short amount of time as we have is if some group were giving us
Stuff,
technology,
yeah,
right? Like they don't believe we could have came from steam engines to where we are today in this amount of time, right?
Yeah, right. Well, and I think there might be some credence to that too. I mean, if the thing in Roswell was really a spacecraft and we dissected it and we reverse engineered it, maybe, But here again, I tend to think that any advanced civilization wouldn't be terribly interested in us. And then there's the other issue. Then there's the other thing I like to speculate about too, which is that just the basic geometry of the human brain may again, physics tells us that we live in either an 11 or a 22-dimensional universe. We can't perceive these dimensions. That's a fact, or it's the best available information, right? Right.
I hadn't heard 22. I had heard 11.
Yeah. So we that essentially is the best available information from the allegedly brightest minds in the world, right? We can perceive 4 dimensions, and so is there anything going on in the other 11?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the beings, is there something that exists in that space that we can't perceive because the geometry of the biology on this planet doesn't allow us to do it. So, I'll tell you a freaky story. This is a true story. So that's the kind of stuff that fascinates me, right? And that may be as crazy as some conspiracy theories are. Right?
I watch theoretical physicists all the time. I'm a fan of Nassim Haramein. I watch all his stuff, and
So here's a freaky thing. So here's a freaky thing that happened to me. Literally happened to me. So my mother died of Alzheimer's, right? And so it was kind of an interesting process to watch, right? So she slowly deteriorated, right? And first, she was like angry, and then she got like real as her brain continued to slowly deteriorate. Then she got like real happy. She was the happiest that I remember, and she was still recognizing people and everything. And then one day I went to visit her at the nursing home she was in, and as I walked in with my ex-wife, she was all excited, and she said, "You should have been here a few minutes ago." I said, "Why is that, Ma?" She goes, "Your father was just here." Now, my father was dead, at that point in time, at least 10 years. I said, "Well, how is he?" Because they tell you with Alzheimer's patients, like "Oh, he's doing good. He wanted to make sure I said hello." Okay. And then we went on with an otherwise normal conversation. But she was dead convinced that she spoke to my father and that we had just missed him.
Yeah.
Maybe she did.
And maybe she did. Now, as the neural geometry of her brain was changing, maybe she was able to pick up something that the rest of us walking around can't do.
Okay.
So a couple of weeks later, we went there again, and we're just having a normal conversation, and she seems to be pretty much with it. And this was the freakiest thing she said. She said to me, she says, I was talking to your Aunt Florence and your Aunt Catherine. Those are my dead aunts, and they were dead 2 decades before my father, right? I said, "Really, Mom?" I said, "How are they?" She looks at me and she goes, "Remarkably well for dead people."
So she knew.
Yeah.
She was communicating.
So she was, she was cognitive enough to know that they were actually dead people, but was absolutely convinced she had a conversation with her 2 dead sisters. And, there's, of course, a couple of things that could have been. It could have been a hallucination in a deteriorating brain, right? Or it could be that the neural geometry in her brain was changing, allowing her to pick up things that walking around we can't see.
Yeah.
And so I think those kinds of questions intrigue me. Was it a hallucination, or was she actually picking something up that we just walking around on a normal basis, don't see or can't detect? And so those kinds of questions about just the nature of reality. And by the way, there's lots of famous physicists have talked about Einstein, Niels Bohr. Lots of famous physicists have talked about what they actually believe reality is or isn't, and I think that kind of stuff is fascinating. So when it gets to religion, for me, you got to get past all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I want to say I've seen videos too, like where they have toddlers and really infantile babies, right, communicating with someone that there's no one in the room with them.
Yeah. So I mean, could it be a hallucination? Could it be the drugs? Or could it be that they're able to pick up something that we just can't do with relatively normal brains? I don't know. So that and the other thing that they teach you in anthropology is that any time that an advanced culture has met a less advanced culture, the less advanced culture has been destroyed.
So maybe we don't want to meet these aliens out there.
So that was Stephen Hawking's warning to us.
Yeah,
he goes, let's not be so excited about meeting the aliens. It maybe won't go over terribly well
for us. We're beaming stuff out there, right? We're beaming our information out there.
We're beaming stuff out there.
Incredibly stupid. I agree.
That was the interesting thing about the Elon Musk conversation with the podcast with Joe Rogan. It was he was mentioning like he was going around to governors and senators and had a meeting with President Obama. It was like, you need to stop AI, or we need to have some controls on AI.
Yeah, no, you really do.
Because people are out there.
Yeah, he says that, but he's got cars that can dance.
So in 1985, I've watched the progression of this, right? So in 1985 is when I started studying AI, right? And
Artificial intelligence.
and
I know what AI
and, and at the beginning at the beginning, I'm asking questions like, okay, when are we going to broadcast sound over the internet? Seems like a relatively simple thing to do, and then that happened. And then that was going on for a couple of years, and I said, okay, so when are we going to broadcast video, over the internet, right? And then I saw an AI program that actually I downloaded on a floppy disk that purported to pass the Turing test, right? Which is the idea of the Turing test is that you could be in a conversation with a computer for some period of time, I think it might be an hour, and not be able to tell whether or not you were being responded to by a machine or by another human on the other end of the computer, right? So I downloaded this whole Turing test thing, right? And then I thought to myself, when is the computing power going to be strong enough to interpret natural language? And then so we watched that happen. And at first, the machine, all the voice interpretation systems had to be trained to your voice. Now they don't. Now they've gotten sophisticated enough that they don't even have to do that. And sort of on and on. And it all kind of culminated with the IBM Watson experiment and its ability to win the Jeopardy match. Did you see that on TV?
Mm-hmm.
That freaking floored me. That totally floored me. That there was so much going, in terms of the history I had in watching this develop. There was just so much going on there.
Yeah.
About when it got the answers right, it was incredible. And even when it got the wrong answers it got, told me more about the system than the right answers did. Just because I know how some of these algorithms work and what the concepts behind some of these algorithms are. And it was like, holy crap, we really crossed a threshold with that. And then this recent thing with, and this occurs every couple of years, then this recent thing with the two machines learning how to talk to one another that nobody else could understand. And this other experiment where the machine demonstrated a limited form of consciousness. I mean, and even before, one of the things I speculated about and ended up being right about, I talk about conspiracy theories, is I was watching all of this develop. And I know about DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency's charter is to ensure that the United States is not technologically surprised from within or from without. So they generally are the ones who are looking at all the goofiest and crazy-ass nut job technologies out there long before.
They're probably stealing it.
Maybe stealing it, and long before anybody else. But computing power reached a certain point. And I would sit around in my spare time and I think to myself, I wonder if the CIA is collecting and interpreting everybody's conversations.
Well, we know they are.
Well, and then, of course, a couple of years later,
Yeah, they are.
damn it, if there wasn't a big, it was the Edward Snowden thing, I guess, comes out and says, well, the CIA is recording
Everything.
literally everything. Now, I knew a couple of years before that we, meaning we, the United States, the government, probably had the capacity to do that. And I kind of just sort of casually wondered to myself, gee, I wonder if they are. And then, of course, Snowden comes out, and sure enough, we're listening to every goddamn thing that goes on. And we're probably, and if you don't think we're interpreting it, if you think that, some poor bastard sitting at the NSA, has to go in and listen to it, to find out what's going on. No.
It's key enough keywords.
No,
for sure.
there's algorithms in there that are actively listening to it to understand it, and then highlighting those things that somebody actually needs to take a listen to. So with all that crap, all that kind of stuff happening, I do agree with Hawking and Musk and others that say that we ought to adopt Asimov's laws of robotics. I think it was in the 60s or 70s. He listed a list of things we should never program, or we should always program robots to do, like not harm
Shut
humans
down.
is the number one. Was the number never harm a human, right?
Yeah. Have you heard of Google Assistant, or have you seen the video about Google? And I want to say it's Google Assistant, and because you had mentioned computers being able to interact with human. Well, there's a video. This guy's introducing the Google Assistant, right?
Yeah.
And he just says, "Hey Google, schedule a haircut appointment for me."
Mm-hmm.
And the computer calls a beauty shop, the closest. It figures out what's the closest one, and I need it scheduled
Yeah.
between 10 and
Yeah.
12 on a Friday.
Yeah.
Google calls, talk, and the person answers, hello, this is, blah, blah, whatever beauty shop. Hi, I'm looking for an appointment between 10 and 3 on Friday. Do you have anything available? The person responds back. It listens to it, interprets what she says, has a conversation.
Yeah.
Well,
That doesn't surprise
I'm not
me,
a bit,
yeah.
they're like, we
No,
don't
I
have
haven't
anything
heard
at
of it.
10, but we have something at 10:30. Okay, that's fine. And the whole time the person's talking.
Yeah, to a
Has
machine.
no idea.
Has no idea.
No idea.
And then it sends the appointment to the person.
Yeah.
You have an, you have an
None of
appointment
that. None of that surprises me, right? So in fact, I was so fascinated by the guy that created the conscious computer that I looked up his I looked up who he was and some of his papers, and he actually published the consciousness equation that he used for those robots. And I have a pretty strong math background, and of course, no expert anymore. But I was able to, read the equation and get the general gist of what he was doing, and it was like shit. I hope this don't get out too far, but.